Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are up to the 24th film in our James Bond retrospective with 2015 Spectre, directed once again by Sam Mendes. Now, if you did a quick YouTube search of our channel, you might find that we actually do already technically have a review of Spectre up on the channel, which is almost approaching its 6th-year anniversary. Obviously, we did that when it first came out, which is absolutely mad. What's even more crazy is that we're at 24 already. I say already, we've been doing these week to week, but it's almost like a heavy heart with this one. And it's not just a heavy heart because we're having to talk about Spectre again tonight, but the fact that it was kind of like all roads were leading to No Time to Die, and they kind of have. Like, we're pre-recording this one, but this will be going up obviously on Tuesday. If you're watching it right now, the UK release is 2 days away for the new film, and we started this 24 weeks back. It's absolutely mad. But we are here to talk about Spectre. But before we do so, I think actually, obviously, everyone commented along. Let us know your thoughts on Spectre. I think this one's going to be very interesting tonight. I don't know if this is divisive. I don't know if people sort of like fall on both sides of this one. From most of the people that we've spoken to, especially the people that we've had on the channel as well, seems pretty unanimous on this one. But this is interesting because I've definitely had a turnaround on this one in a not so great way. But before we get into it, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. Comment along because we've got a bit to say. I think before we really get into the meat of it, because there's a lot of certainly the last 6 months. There's been a lot of discovery, and it's scary to look back on that we started this the day after the Oscars aired,
Oh my
or that's
god.
when I watched Doctor No. It was the
Yeah.
morning after the Oscars. I watched Doctor No, and it was that week we kickstarted Bond, and it's insane to think about. We're 2 days away, and it's the fact that we didn't know. I mean, we assumed in April it would come out in September, but at the end of August, there was that doubt online. It was like, is it going to get pulled? Is it going to get pulled? And
Mhm.
we were pretty confident. And here we are. So, unless something majestical happens in the next 2 days, but we want to know your thoughts. So, comment below with this. And if you are new to the channel, or if you've been checking out our bonds, if you want to find out a bit more, we've obviously been a lot more active on social media recently. You can find those over on our social medias, which is Facebook Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, letterbox.com/cinema savvy, and of course we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. And of course, we're all doing this for No Time to Die. We wouldn't just randomly record a Spectre review. No one really wanted to. Um, we're going to get a spoiler preview out this Thursday, the 30th of September. The three of us would have seen it by then. We'll be having prestige spoiler-free thoughts. Don't even need to worry. Not even plot points are going to get brought up. If you want to go in clean or hear someone's opinions clean, then do check that out. We'll be getting this up this Thursday when the three of us have seen it. So more details on our social media as we get a little bit closer. But as we said, this is one we've already. I mean, I wasn't on the Spectre on the channel, so that was that's how new it was. I think it was the start of like year one when I took a gap with uni, and
Mhm.
I remember there's been a few discussions on our Facebook
Oh,
chat between the three of
there
us,
has. Yep.
and there's been
Yep.
some amazing old messages which are brought up. I'm not going to put them on the screen for anybody at home, but it's a conversation that was done like 5 years ago, and no one spoke about it since. And um, as far as a prelude goes, I'm going to ask you, as we keep saying this again, we're in newer territory, right? What were your sort of first time memories of watching this back all that time ago in 2015?
Well, I guess I should have rewatched our old review, shouldn't I, to kind of recap what my thoughts were almost 6 years ago now when that film came out. I'm not going to. I hate watching our old stuff. I'm never going to watch our old stuff or my old self on there. But suffice to say, obviously back then, especially with like all the Craig films, I wasn't a Bond fan at the time. You know, I was kind of seeing them. Skyfall was the first one that I ever saw in the cinema, and then obviously this was the second one, and it was just the craze. It was like the build up to it. It was the new film out. It was the big new film out, like the big blockbuster film that everyone was going to see. I didn't care for Skyfall at the time that I watched it. Obviously, thankfully, due to this retrospective going back again, I've had a complete 180 on that film, and I do appreciate it a lot more. So it was kind of hot off the heels of that one. And to be honest, at the time, Spectre for me was kind of more of the same. But I do think at the time I did enjoy Spectre just a little bit more. I thought it had a stronger villain. How wrong I was back then. And I think it was the more familiar ingredients in there. We had a henchman in this film with Batista's character, which we'll obviously get into later in the discussion. And it felt like it had more of these pieces that equated to more of like the classic feel for a Bond film. I think Skyfall in many ways was that outlier. It was kind of very much a self-contained story, or at least it was until Spectre came along, and that I think that's definitely going to be a big discussion point as well, of sort of retconning and bringing Skyfall into the sort of like wider Bond continuity, I guess. But I didn't care for the film wholeheartedly at the time. I think I enjoyed it just a smidgen more than Skyfall at the time. I don't now, and we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, I was still quite negative on it. I still wasn't anywhere near the Bond fan that I am today. In fact, I was completely opposite. I didn't care for Bond, and Spectre certainly didn't do it any justice for me at the time.
Spectre was a weird one. So before this week, I'd seen this film fully once, and I'm gonna say I didn't dislike it at launch. I have to say that because I'll be lying if I didn't. I just tried to watch it. I believe I tried to watch it twice more since it came out. The first, I think it's a few days, but the first time I did it, I put it on very late, and I sort of dozed off at the Austria scene. And then the second time, this was really funny. So I was watching on Monday with my parents. I put the Blu-ray in, and it pops up saying resume playback,
Yeah,
and it was the hotel scene of the mice, and I must have just turned it off in anger or something. But
yeah.
obviously, I pressed no, went to the beginning. But uh, I should have grabbed it. But when the film came out, I wasn't a hype. So there were two big things in 2015. I mean, it's nowhere near as big. The big one was Star Wars, The Return of Star Wars, Episode 7.
Hmm.
And Spectre was like the side piece, like it's coming out a couple months before, but everyone only really cares about Star Wars right now. And I remember being really amazed. So one of my best friends at the time, we both loved Bond. We'd always watch the Bond films with each other. And when this one came out, they did a synchronized premiere with cinemas in the UK. So every cinema was allowed to show it. It was like 7:30 on a Tuesday, and that would be it for that day. And then it would kickstart the next day, and it was really weird. I mean, we bought a ticket, and the whole gimmick was that it went on at the Albert Hall at the same time as everyone watching it. So a bit gimmicky, but a bit weird as well because you weren't actually at the premiere. They made out you were. They gave everyone like Spectre tickets that were like cardboard and everything. It was really, and this is just a local little cinema, not IMAX, and nothing nice. It was just a bog standard cinema, and I loved the film when it came out. I was on a proper high the day after. I remember I was like, it ticked all the boxes. And I was like, we got a henchman, we got a villain, we
Yeah,
got Aston Martin,
yeah.
we got a car chase, we got to do this. And, I really enjoyed it for the first, when it came out. And looking back now, I think I was very hyped leading into it. And we'll get into the Spectre later, but it was the fact Spectre were back. It was post Sky because I loved Skyfall. It was we're getting a new film post Skyfall. Okay, cool, I'm in. We've got a whole new MI6 cast. We'll get to them, and it's like, and we have the rights to Spectre, and you're like, I'm in. And there was that first poster of the gunshots making the Spectre thing, and they did the press conference with the new Aston Martin, and they had everybody there, and I was like, oh my god, we're getting Spectre. This is going to be incredible, and yeah, the film, as I said, I didn't mind it when it came out, but I never went back to it. Which, heading into this retrospective, I've kind of said from the beginning, I'm a bit nervous about getting to Spectre because it has gone down a lot in my estimations over the 6 years.
Mhm.
But we know how much of a big role it's going to play in potentially setting up the new film. So yeah, not exactly, can't exactly say, no, I've watched this loads. I've deep dived into this. It felt like I was watching it for the first time again, but not on Monday. And we're pretty close to Chris on the Friday, and yeah, there's a lot of issues, and all the Bond fans that have come on, as everyone always says, you even the films you dislike, you can take positives out of it, and I'll give it that. But my word, just as an initial thing, like how boring. Like what I was so flat out after rewatch this on. Oh, sorry, it was Tuesday, not Monday. You watched it on Monday, didn't you? And
Yeah, yeah.
I went to bed early. Like the film finished at like 9, and I want to go to bed like 2. And I
Took
just
it out
sat
of you.
there reading. Yeah, I was just completely out of it. Like I can't not really do anything. I just carried on reading June. And then I was suddenly in bed at like 10 on a weeknight. And I was like, what's going on? Like I hit adulthood, and it's just yeah.
I'll say
Really
the
struggled with it.
biggest problem with this film fundamentally, and I had it at the time, but my Christ, I had it again watching it I think this was actually the third time that I watched it, believe it or not. I think once at the cinema, I think watched it with my family after it was released on sort of like home video kind of time. They hated it as well, but they're not Daniel Craig fans. But I went into this with an open mind. I really did. And similar to Skyfall, I remembered elements of it, but fundamentally, because it's been so many years and because I wasn't invested in the film when it originally came out, this was like watching it again for the first time for me. And I wanted to be changed. I wanted my mind to be changed on this film or to like it a lot more than at least I did, like I did with Skyfall. I had a massive turnaround on that film. But I still don't with this one. I still don't. And in fact, it's gone down from what I last remembered. As I mentioned at the beginning, like I did enjoy this film more than Skyfall, but watching them through this retrospective and in quite quick succession, it's night and day. And honestly, right now, this might be like, hyperbole or anything, or like exaggeration, because it is so, fresh out the oven essentially since I last watched this film. This might even be bottom of the stack for me out of all the Bond films. Now I'll concede it's a better made film than, the likes of, I don't know, Die Another Day, or Quantum of Solace, which, obviously was very rushed. We talked about that in the review. I'll concede it's a better made film, but just in terms of the pacing kills this film dead. I was watching this again, obviously, Bond mode now with this retrospective and everything. And 45 to 50 minutes in, I was done. I was tapped. I wasn't invested in anything that was going on. The plot wasn't engaging. Just in terms of how the film looks as well, it's so dull and dark and desaturated. Right from the opening scene, from the opening logos of the film, it's like they've gone into, Premiere, cranked the saturation all the way down. It's not quite black and white, but it's, getting to that territory. And it just seems really miserable. And I know that that's a thing, like a moniker that a lot of people attach to the Craig era, but it's never been this bad. And I don't even think Skyfall was this bad, to be honest, in terms of just how it looks and the overall mood of it. So I think it's a question of pacing. It's very long as well. I mean, it's 2.5 hours, so No Time to Die is 15 minutes longer than this film, but already from the trailers, this looks a lot more engaging. But that being said, Spectre had some great trailers at the time, I seem to remember. So, we could all be fooled. In 2 days' time, we'll find out. But and the story is really just, it's paper thin story, and it's just not engaging. It's not enthralling. At least with the likes of Skyfall, you had, a really interesting villain, probably one of the most interesting villains that we've ever seen in the Bond franchise. How well written, how tightly written it was, how it ties into Bond and especially M, and everything comes together. And that, I think the feeling of sort of like a self-contained film really helped Skyfall to kind of stand on its own back. This one, like, what's the plot to this one? Some kind of surveillance scam going on with MI6 and Blofeld, and then apparently Bond has like a surrogate brother now as well. Did we want to see that? Probably not, but especially over 2.5 hours. That's it. And we'll get into the subplot and everything with the whole surveillance thing, but it's just awfully written, like painfully simplistically written. It doesn't have any of the depth or the intricacy that a Skyfall had, or a Casino Royale had, or even, hell, a lot of the previous Bond films had before this point. It's just a really mundane experience to get through. And I really wanted to like this film, but honestly, and I think when we did our Die Another Day review, we had Tom on from A to Z podcast, and he mentioned that, he really struggles with this film as well. And I was saying that, Die Another Day is clearly the worst one. And he said, there are, probably worse Bond films, but they're a lot easier to get through. I think he even mentioned Diamonds Are Forever, which is one of my particular low points of the franchise, certainly even now. But I would rather watch that than this film again, because I do think, this film is probably objectively better made. But in terms of a slog to get through, I mean, Spectre takes the cake for me.
It's and we'll get into it properly in a minute, but it's when you've got, I think, was this about 250, $300 million to make? When
I
you
think
have
it's
a
one of the most
film
it
that
might be the
is,
most expensive Bond film, isn't it? I'm not
I
sure on
think
the
so,
new
yeah,
one,
no, I think
but
it is. I think
it's
it
up
is,
there, I
and
think.
it's, without getting too in on it, it's really, because I want to right. The term "well made" is I'm trying to like piece in my head right now. Its fatal issue is the script, and the script
Mhm,
at that. And it's not like Quantum where we can take pity on it for the writer strike. This is a script that was made and was filmed, and there are issues which we'll get to later.
mhm,
But it's not frustrating. Sounds like I want to hate it, but I can't fault the production design of the locations. I can't fault the sporadic bits of action that we do get,
mhm,
all the set pieces, the car chases, the locations, the stunt work as well, the quality, and it's like everything's in place to make a good film except the glue of it, which is the story, the script, and I think the performances aren't bad, but they don't rub off because they've not got much to work off.
yeah.
And let's dig into it because we're gonna it's been 50 minutes, but as always, you don't really get a Bond film without a bit of delay, do you? But we have, I guess, we can say positive news for a change. We sort of mentioned it earlier. The rights issue of Spectre, as you can tell by the title of the film, the poster of the film, the villain of the film, and centric themes. A small court case that's been going on for only 50 years at that point was finally put to bed in 2013, and Sony/MGM retained all the essentially got all the rights to the Kevin McClory stuff, the scripts, organizations, Blofeld, everything. And I think, to be, I can't remember if you had this chat with the Tate off camera the other day, but it's one of them where 100%, absolutely, you know, if you're Barbara Rock and Michael G. Wilson and you've been dealing with a court case for decades that pops up every few years, when you win it, you're going to make a statement. And for the Bond franchise, post Skyfall, the 50th anniversary celebration, you get the rights back to one of the most iconic things in all of James Bond. You have to make a film Spectre. And I've got no issue with the name of it being Spectre as well. It's getting the rights back. Again, that first press conference, I remember it was incredible because it was like, oh, they're going to do old school Bond and everything. And, you know, we got the film. But I think that's a really big thing. And even though I don't like the film now, I do like the fact that this rights settlement is done and dusted now, that it is
Yeah.
resolved. And whether or not the film was good or bad, you know, we weren't discussing what could have been if Daniel Craig's era could have had the rights to this and that. So it's a really interesting one. I don't know if you've got much on it because obviously you're a bit newer, so I don't know if you ever knew about the right stuff beforehand.
Oh, I didn't know about it, like, when this film was coming out or anything like that. I was completely fresh as a daisy to it, and have been since starting this retrospective, to be honest, and that's why it's been great going from week to week, reading the behind the scenes and seeing how it kind of all slots into place like a big jigsaw puzzle. But I mean, yeah, what I want to know is, clearly they wanted to include Spectre, which is, I'm guessing, why they tried to settle this dispute in the first place. Like, I didn't know if it was something that was just going on the side. They got the rights back, and it was like, well, we've got them back now. We may as well make the next film about Spectre, or if it was always on the cards that they wanted to get Spectre back. I imagine it was an idea that they always wanted to go to. Otherwise, they wouldn't waste all that money on very expensive legal disputes, I assume. But it is a big deal, you know, getting Spectre back. And we haven't seen Spectre in a film since really Diamonds Are Forever, you know, the character of Blofeld and the organization and everything. Yes, you did have that moment in, I forget which Roger Moore film it was now. I feel really bad that I've forgotten which one it is. It's,
Your
is
Eyes
it,
Only.
For Your Eyes Only? Yeah, yeah, where it's not technically credited as Blofeld, but it's Blofeld. You know, it's that like statement that we don't need him, we can get rid of him. And then X amount of years, we bring him back. But I think it makes sense to bring him back because Blofeld is James Bond's main villain. Like, you could make that argument, you could say it's someone else, but Blofeld fundamentally is that villain that has cropped up many different times in many different faces and different actors playing him, but he is that main villain. So getting him back in the organization, with getting Spectre back, obviously they had to go back and sort of retcon a few elements, specifically from Quantum of Solace with the organization of Quantum, which was clearly gearing up in that film to be the stand-in for what Spectre would be, but obviously they didn't have the rights at the time. Um, the retcon's a little bit clumsy, but it's fine. I can totally understand why they had to do it. But yeah, it's a big deal. You know, bringing Blofeld into it, we've having this conversation off camera as well. They'd have been stupid not to. Like, as of Casino Royale, it was a reboot. You have your main villain back in the franchise. And you think back to some of those earlier Bond films, you know, specifically the Sean Connery ones. Blofeld was in like near enough pretty much every single one in some way, shape, or form, whether it was like a tease at the end or Spectre was always there in the shadow. So it makes sense, and especially because Quantum was teased in, and Quantum was teased in Quantum, of course it was. But then Skyfall did away with all that. It didn't bring in those plot elements from Quantum of Solace or that organization. It was just completely standalone, wasn't it, with Silver? So
Yeah.
they would have had to have gone back to that plot line with this one. I think if this one didn't go into that, too much time would have passed since Quantum of Solace, and the whole drive of that organization and that villainous organization would have just been dead in the water. But it's really interesting. I'm glad that they've got it settled and that, you know, he's finally back where he belongs, kind of thing. You could probably, maybe some Kevin McClory sympathizers out there maybe think that maybe it should have gone to the grave with him, but I don't have a problem with Blofeld being the villain or Spectre coming back into it. It makes sense, and I think it's a good direction for where the story needed to go. But as we mentioned, it's just the script that kind of lets it down. The idea itself ain't a bad idea, really, in having that be your main villain.
Yeah, I mean, how we get there is obviously also bringing back Sam Mendes, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
I think the first time since John Glenn, a director's come back simultaneously
Mhm.
for the follow film. Obviously, Martin Campbell
Consecutive.
did
Yeah, yeah.
too, and you know you can't blame them. 2012 again, Skyfall, highest grossing film in UK cinema history, awards, everything dominated. Sam Mendes, I mean, he didn't. From what you'd read, he didn't want to come back, and they do try and say he didn't ever say that, but I think he did
I believe it.
theatre first,
Yeah.
yeah, and he did a theatre show before he said he would come back, and everything was in place so quickly. And we know that Nicholas Winding Refn declined. Well, he said he turned it down. Then it hasn't seen that he directed, not directed. Yeah, he did direct Drive. What am I on about? He directed Drive, Only God Forgives, and Neon Demon. Obviously, you got to think 2012 Skyfall. What big releases just come out? Drive the year before with this really arty type thing, and I like him. I don't think he would have worked for James Bond. In absolute truth, but
Think it would have been very
Mendes,
stylized, maybe. If you look at his films, they are very out there. Brosnan as well. Brosnan, Jesus Christ, what was
it
it?
would have been
Bronson,
like
sorry,
a
Bronson. He
yeah,
directed, which is a very artsy, weird, almost Kubrickian type film. So, I mean, he would have been bringing that style because that's his natural style as a
him
director, and I can't imagine that with Bond.
with
But then
this.
you look at some of the action scenes in Drive and the violence and some of the action
I
scenes,
could
how it's
see it with
covered in that,
Craig.
and
And that's what I could see. I could see him handling Daniel Craig as a lead in his
yeah,
Spy really well. I just couldn't imagine the overarching plots and all that kind of stuff coming together, especially with someone like Spectre. So
yeah,
it's a tricky one. I mean, it might be quality for all we know. But Sam Mendes was saying again at the time, who is going to doubt that? He just directed Skyfall
yeah.
and the right person. He's got a great working relationship with Daniel Craig and all the others, and keys to the kingdom. You broke all these records. Why wouldn't you ask him to come back? And again, it was the right choice to make. And whether he wanted to or not is another question. But I think we've also got to mention the Sony leaks.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah,
if
I
anyone's
remember
familiar
it
with
well.
Sony, um, I want to say it was early 2013, late
Yeah.
2014. I remember being at college when this came out, and you would literally just read leaked emails online, not even trying to search it. They just appeared on social media. And I remember I'm not gonna lie, I never really cared for Bond because the only big leak I remember was the whole 22 Jump Street's actually going to be a crossover with Men in
Men in
Black, and we're
Black.
going to get
Yeah.
this incredible sequel. And it would have been absolutely phenomenal. In the films we never got, that's right at the top what I'd have wanted. Instead, we got Men in Black International. And there was a lot of Spectre. I think it was Sony execs were like not rubbishing the film, but just saying it was a mess.
They were
Everything was a
saying it
mess.
was
They weren't
over
impressed.
budget, I think, weren't they? It was getting too expensive. I think they were saying there were script issues or story issues or something
Yeah,
like that. They had concerns about it, essentially, is the
and that
big
was
takeaway
before,
from it.
and that and I remember that, and I was like, that does not look good. I mean, it didn't look good that Sony got hacked because I think obviously, I mean, the next film is coming out in 2 days, but we knew they were. I think after the Sony leak, everyone was aware that Bond was going to leave Sony. I think they've been wanting it. There might
Mhm.
be rights deals other people can sort of delve into more, but I remember at the time hearing that the Broccoli's wanted to move on past Sony. They'd got what they'd wanted from them, and also I think that the leaking of the emails was. I mean, it's the worst thing you can have. Did they? I think they leaked the script as well at one point, one of the earlier
Yeah.
drafts, and you know, it was carnage. And you look at that in a modern lens and stuff that happens, but it should never happen. And I remember Sony again, you've got to rewind the clock, it's 2014. It's only 3, 4 years earlier when do you remember when PSN got hacked and went down for like a
Yeah,
month?
I didn't know if it was around this same time, actually. I was gonna mention that. Hey, I got 2 free games out of that, so
Same.
thanks,
One of
PSN,
them was
but
great. Yeah, it was one of those where it was happening again. It just looked so bad on Sony's half. And that
Mhm.
was also, I want to say, another big news piece. That was when they kind of like announced that Andrew Garfield wouldn't be making a Spider Man film. It was like the train wreck. And they'd spoke about it openly. So, yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation one day. Not that we'd go out and find the leaked emails again, but it's quite damning.
I
And
mean, some were an absolute trip, weren't they? I mean, there was bitchiness, there was backstabbing, there
yeah,
was there was outright racism, sexism, anything you name it was in those emails. And I remember them coming out in drips and drabs that you could read. I don't think that was pertaining necessarily to Bond, but I just remember as a company
the whole
overall,
situation. Yeah, it was
it
terrible.
wasn't great, was it? As the face of the company. Just going back to the Mendes thing really quickly. This is just sort of like my 2 cents on it. I can absolutely understand why they brought him back, as you mentioned. Like Skyfall was massive, like biggest Bond film ever. Well, currently, um, but I think it was a mistake bringing him back. I think he was creatively tapped with this one as an auteur director, and I could kind of see this with Nolan as well. Like I know when we've sort of like speculated off camera that we really want to see Nolan direct it. You probably more so than me. I think that's fair to say, but I could see him being a one and done. I know he has done a trilogy. He's of course done the
Yeah.
Batman trilogy, but I think that should have been the case with Mendes. He came in, he put his artistic stamp on it. It felt very unique in the Bond franchise and the Bond canon, but I don't think that lightning struck twice with this one. I don't think you can capture that same magic and that same idea. And quite frankly, there are ideas in this, mostly down to the writing, that feels like it was handed off to a completely different writing team. And what's amazing is that it's exactly the same writers on Skyfall into this one. There are decisions in this film that are just downright baffling, and it's mostly some tonal moments in the film, but like the retconning of things, especially
Yeah.
chief among them, the retconning of Skyfall itself. I don't know how Mendes cleared that, wanted to do that, didn't have input in that, and also the writers. They came up with like a great, unique standalone Bond film. Why ruin everything that you set up with that previous one? It's just I don't know where those ideas came from, who okayed it, and especially by committee with everyone involved from the previous film. I don't know how that flew, to be honest.
And I think that's my. I think the riding the Skyfall train was so high. I think it was probably this won't. I can imagine them thinking this isn't going to backfire. This can't not work. And unfortunately, long term, it's not. I mean, we don't really talk about critics' reviews, but I was shocked when Rotten Tomatoes were on 61%. Yes, Rotten Tomatoes can be used for and against your arguments, but for some reason, I always thought this sat in like the late 70s, early 80s, didn't realize it was this low. And somebody mentioned to me previously, they didn't do, I think it was on the Radio 7 podcast, they mentioned that there weren't any press screenings for Spectre when it came out, which is always a warning sign. Obviously, they did the instant premiere, which was probably a loophole around it. And yeah, it's quite damning, really. And if you actually want to get into the film, because we've been a bit of a downer, I want to talk about one of my two favorite scenes, which is the pre-credit scene, because we always start these with a pre-credit scene, so it's a good thing that we've got a good one, right? I love Mexico. Now, the whole film marketing was Mexico, Day of the Dead, all that kind of stuff. I'm actually going to hand
Posters,
over
I
to you
remember as well. You had the design,
blue background, and it was like we're getting this humongous set piece. It looked incredible. I'm here for it, and that's a really big thing heading into the film. But as the film starts, I'd completely forgotten about this. We get a little title card, don't we, Chris?
Yes, we do. Well, I'm trying to remember what the original is now, because I have my notes. Usually I reserve this for one-liners only. This is more a stream of consciousness. So I've put "The Dead Speak," which, of course, for your Star Wars fans out there, you know exactly what I'm referring to there. It's "The Dead Are Alive," I think is that the it's something like that. And I mean, that is Mendes through and through right there. Like, if you start your film with a title card like that, that's like an artistic statement. That's like film student logic right there. Like, oh, this is edgy and different. What I will say,
it's on the screenwriter font, isn't it? It's
yeah,
like the typewriter font as well.
It's so transparent what they're trying to do with it, and that's the whole film to me with this one. Like Skyfall, you can look at it and go, well, it's more artsier in terms of the direction, but it's still massive in scope in some aspects, and it's quite personal in other things, and you can tell that it's a director's film. This one felt like, let's just pull out all of the artistic wankery tricks in the book, essentially. And I hate moments like that. And it does spoil the opening, because we finally get the gun barrel at the beginning of the film, and it's great, and it throws you into it, and it's like, yes, we're kickstarting with Bond strong. And then it just cuts to that title card, really bewildering. And it's like, it's so pointless to the film. I get what they're trying to do. The dead are actually alive. It's like, oh, Blofeld, you thought he was dead all along, but he's actually still alive out there. I get it. But it's just so unnecessary. Like, that should have just cut straight from the gun barrel, boom, to that opening shot at Dia des Muertos. And, just thinking about it, that is Mendes through and through, because he is a very artsy fartsy director. You look at one of his previous films, American Beauty, where there's a whole plot point of a guy recording a plastic bag blowing in the wind to some very nice Thomas Newman music, and it's meant to be all artsy and emotional and thought-provoking, and it's like he's literally just recording a piece of trash in the wind, like what do you want from me? So I mean, that's a director statement there, but it's just so unnecessary. It doesn't need to be in the film. And I know it's such a small point, but it did kind of irk me from the beginning. That being said, the rest of the scene, there's no real reason it needs to be filmed in one shot. And I mean, you can see this clearly as that precursor to 1917, can't you? You can see where, he wanted to kind of mine that moment for all it's worth, essentially. I guess it does ground you in the scene. I mean, the amount of extras they have, which probably were digitally enhanced as well, but it is a spectacle to behold, and it probably is one of my favorite scenes in the film, in all honesty. There's a moment, and go on. Sorry, what was that? Sorry,
you said a spectacle to behold.
That's
terrible pun of the night.
Unintentional. Speaking of unintentional, I don't know if this is a reference to. I don't know if Mendes is a Kubrick fan or not, but when Bond goes to the room It's room number 327. Now, in The Shining, the room is 237. Possibly a coincidence, but those numbers are very specific numbers. I could be reaching there. I noticed it. I don't know if that's a callback to The Shining or not. I don't know. Probably not, but I noticed it. Yeah, I'll pass over to you because I do have some more things on the opening scene where it's almost like they're bringing in Roger Moore aspects to it as well, which are some of the aspects to the film overall that I'm not too keen on personally.
Yeah, I mean, in the mindset, right? I mean, we've both done. I don't say films, but we've done uni, we've studied film, and you get this point when you discover long takes, tracking shots, and it is the most mesmerizing thing. Like, how did they do it? And I'm not gonna like, I get giddy when I see them still, and I
Mhm.
really enjoy them. And I remember Spectre was like the peak of that. Like, we just got a 5 minute sequence of James Bond as a one shot take, and it's incredible. And I love the whole opening. I think now we know about Daniel Craig's injury stuff that he spoke on in the documentary. You know, he spoke a lot about the injury before filming, and he was in so much pain and stuff. And I didn't know he mentioned it, you can see him walking a bit funny. I never really clocked it, but the opening stuff I really like because it's like just James Bond on a mission, and we've not had that for quite a while. In
That's
absolute
true.
truth, like
Yeah,
as
yeah.
in even not when we say mission, Skyfall, we're like midway into a mission, right? Quantum, well, you're at the epilogue of Casino. Casino, he's assassinating someone, and it's like here's the big grandiose opening that we've not really had. And I like the other openings, it's fine, but this was like the old school Roger Moore 15-minute short film starts end of this. And I love the costumes of the street, the design, everything. I love all of that kind of stuff, Spectre. And obviously you get the blowing up the house thing. And I know exactly what bit you don't like. And I really like it. And Dad did a really cheesy laugh. It was when he falls onto the sofa.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is where this is where I get a bit torn because obviously I went guns in on Roger Moore, right, saying 3 hours only is not a Roger Moore film, it's him trying to do a Connery.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
does it make me hypocrite say I don't mind it? But I'm gonna make a take that one. I mean, we'll get into Craig in a bit, but I think Daniel Craig's rather underrated with the Roger Mooreisms, and that's a really odd thing to say. But he may not have been smart, but as he is, I don't mean he's not old at all. Like he's in his mid 40s at this point, I want to say, and there's probably this around a similar age to Brosnan in Die Another Day, and he's getting a little bit older, but not too old. But I think he has like an uncomfortable humor with it that I just feel worked. When Roger Moore did a joke, it's like, he's a gentleman.
Mhm.
Whereas Daniel Craig, like, he looks uncomfortable to do it, the character, and I think that's why I always found that it worked. I don't know, but I do hate the CGI building because it just
Yeah.
ruins the incredible practical opening to then just the CGI rubble to then go back to having a big live action moment again. It's that weird jump of, don't why change it up? You can still do the same scene, just less dramatically, just having someone get shot through a window or something. So I do have some issues with it, but the whole opening, I'm really in with it. And also, it was a very smart marketing mechanism because so much attention was on that. And it was like impossible to not put Spectre alongside the Day of the Dead stuff. And
Mhm.
yeah, I get everyone's issues with it, but for me, this is I just love this scene. I don't know what it is about. Is it the music? Is it that we've never? I mean, I say we've never really seen Day of the Dead stuff. Is it Live and Let Die has something similar? There
Yeah,
is
I mean,
a
there's
Roger Moore
parades,
film.
isn't there? There's Mardi Gras parades. I know that they're in a few of the Bond films, like the earlier ones, maybe. I think in oh god, which one is it? Is it Moonraker as well? That might be the Mardi Gras one, actually. I'm not sure. We have had parades similar to this. I don't know if we've
Yeah,
specifically had Dia des Muertos though. I can't remember. I'd have to go back through them. I don't think we have. This might be the first one, but going back to what you said, and yeah, I'm going with the For Your Eyes Only comparison here, in that it's great that Roger Moore can showcase a more serious, more brutal Bond, but that ain't his Bond. So when we have moments like this, and some people are probably clamoring for more moments like this with Craig, and I think this film definitely brings a lot more of those moments than perhaps we have had in any of his previous films, like those Roger Mooreisms in the film. But that ain't Daniel Craig's Bond, and I think, I mean, if a moment like that had have happened in a Connery or a Moore or even a Brosnan, I would have been fine with it because tonally that's in keeping with that Bond. But this new continuity, starting with Casino Royale, has gone out of its way to be gritty, to be realistic and more serious, in tone. So I don't see that as kind of like, oh, that's, James Bond, because to me, that's not this incarnation of James Bond. And it's more of a convenience in the writing. It's almost like I see it more of like we've written ourselves into a corner here. Bond's on a building and it's collapsing and he falls, and then, oh, let's just put a sofa there and he's fine, and he gets up and walks off. And it's like that just feels really, there's no peril in the scene. It's like, what are the odds that of all the places there happens to be a sofa there? And maybe they could have saved it if there was like a one liner. I was trying to think, because I was watching it with my dad, and my dad always, as we've been watching the Craig ones, he always goes, and one liner, because he's used to the Roger Moore ones, and half of the time you don't get one with the Craig films. And he was saying like, oh, it needs to be like so far so good or something. I'm like, it's a dad joke. Come on, like you're not going to get better than that, are you, for a pun in a Bond film? But it felt like it needed something. Maybe if it was punctuated with a one liner, then maybe I'd have been more okay with it. But even then, that would have still felt very cheesy and very out of place in the grand scheme of things, especially with this film, too. I mean, this is probably one of the most depressing Bond films, certainly out of the Craig continuity, I would say. Um, but there's lots of little moments like this. I do want to correct myself on a moment from later on in the film. Probably throughout all of this retrospective, and not just this retrospective, I probably mentioned this for years on the channel. I always thought there was a Union Jack parachute in this film after he ejects out of the car during the car chase in Rome. There isn't. It's just a black parachute. But I think, the bit where he lands in the street and he nods to someone, doesn't he, as he's walking past, very Roger Moore-esque. But the part that sticks out like a sore thumb to me is also in the same sequence in Rome, where he kind of tailgates that civilian car and he's kind of pushing the car along, and it's very cartoony and it's very wacky and silly, and it just feels out of
Roger
place.
Moore.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if Roger Moore had done that, wouldn't have a problem with it, would have loved it, would have laughed with it. But in a film that is going out of its way to be so serious and dour and brooding and introspective, those moments in this film stick out like a sore thumb to me. And I don't recall Skyfall or maybe any of the previous ones having as many moments like that than this film particularly does.
No, and I reckon what it is, just had this thought on the spot that when you think about Skyfall, right, you get the tube scene when he runs, jumps onto the train. It's the old couple that do the one liner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you get the cufflink adjusting, which I think is great as well when he jumps on another train.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And it's like, I think, was A to Z did mention it in one of their videos that I think Daniel Craig or someone's explanation was that old Bond, did up his cuffs because he was nervous about the situation. I think there's some report that an actor or somebody on set, and I was like, just say he was just doing like a Roger Moore thing, it's fine, but they didn't want to.
Mhm.
And that's where I kind of am with this one, that they take some of the so-called humor from Skyfall and trying to apply it a lot more to this. And a lot of the humor in Skyfall isn't actually Craig, it's the characters around him.
Yeah.
It's Money Penny making a line at him or something. It's not normally him that goes for the one-liner. And I think that's where they failed. They then started putting the humor on Craig in this one. And then so, I mean, we'll talk about the other thing. The set piece is the helicopter scene, which was in all the trailers. This was it the first ever scene on film to have a helicopter do a full spin? Did they say, or something
Oh,
like?
the loop, or are you talking about just
Yeah,
when
I
it's
want to.
yeah.
I think it was when they show it going sort of diagonally spinning. I think this is the
Mhm.
first ever time a helicopter did it, and
I'm not
again, it's a
sure.
fantastic stunt and it works well. But I know you're gonna have the speaking about the projection, but it's so random with the set piece. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We'll praise Mission Impossible, right? Oh, we got Tom Cruise on the side of a plane. What was the point of that? It's just a pre-credit sequence in Mission
Mhm.
Impossible 5. I was like, okay. But that's the whole point of Mission Impossible now, is Tom Cruise doing these ridiculous stunts that no one else can do. Well, no actors can do, not stunts
Mhm.
people, obviously. And with the helicopter one, like, it's cool. There's a helicopter fight, but it's also a bit not dumb, but I don't know. There's something missing, right? When you got those Brosnan Bond openings, it was like, whoa, like not a save the day type thing, but it felt like there was peril. You
Mhm.
could die another day. You can look at Tomorrow Never Dies, of course, Goldeneye. They always felt like there's a bit of peril, but with Spectre, I mean, not only do we know that Craig's going to get the job done, but when it's just a faceless character,
Yeah.
you know, it's even more sort of predictable or something. So I don't know if that's just me, but I love the stunt side of it. And again, it's shot really well. I mean, we haven't spent that. Obviously, Roger Deakins didn't come back for this. Hoyt Van Hoytman came on board, who was a phenomenal DP. And then I look at his stuff on like Tenet, Interstellar, and then you see Spectre, and it's like the film is shot well.
It's just an
But
ugly
the
film.
color grade, it's
Yeah.
it's ugly, and I don't know if that's a post-production choice. But you could take all the shots out of isolation; it will look like a great Bond film. It look as good as Spectre. Sorry, as good as Skyfall. But there's something about that color palette. When he's on the ice later on, there's a beautiful landscape shot, and it's just like green. I think you even warned me. I was like, it's all green. I was like, is it? I don't remember it. And
Mhm.
you get to Day of the Dead Mexican. It's like it should be sunny, and there's something really weird
You
about
need the
this.
colors. That's the scene where you need the colors to pop and the saturation and like the warmth, warm tones of the colors and everything. The helicopter thing itself, when it pulls back to the wide shots and you have those stunt men strapped to the side of that helicopter, it's incredible. I do think it perhaps goes on a tad too long. It's like, how many times do you have to see a helicopter spinning around? Like, I was just screaming at the screen light to the pilot, just keep it steady. Why have you got to keep spinning it? I know I guess he's trying to throw Bond off, isn't it? But it's like, come on. You've tried the one tactic so far. You're going to try it for like the next 5 minutes of doing exactly the same thing. That being said, though, the loop is absolutely incredible. I'm trying to think if I've seen a film where that's happened with a helicopter, and I can't think of one. So you might be right with that if it was the first film to do it. So it is just those rear projection things, and I can't come down on it too hard because you ain't going to have Daniel Craig doing that. I know that he does a lot of his own stunts, but come on. When you get to that kind of level, right, with a spinning
Why
helicopter
it's
where it's
doing a
death
loop to loop?
defying. Yeah,
It's
exactly. Like I get it. It just sticks out, as we say. It always does when you have so much practical stuff before it. When you are pulling back to those wide shots, when you do cut to like an obvious rear projection, it's not as bad as the skydive from Quantum of Solace. I will say that is still probably and the Komodo dragons. I've got to throw them in again. I've got to throw in my hate for the Komodo dragons. It's not that bad, and I get why they do it. It just kind of stuck out to me, and it was just like, well, I know that Bond isn't in this situation, and that's where that disconnect might be. I do think, as sort of like pre-credit title sequences go, I think Skyfall's is definitely a lot better than this one, and I do think that
looking
Skyfall
back,
as a film is better shot than this film, just in terms of how it looks. Not to take anything away from Hoyt van Hoytmer, he's done incredible work, and his work on that is great. But I do agree, visually, it's just a murky, dark, really miserable looking film. It might be one of the most miserable looking Bond films. Like I'm going back to sort of the early Moore ones with Live and Let Die and
that's just all
even
shot at
Diamonds Are
night.
Forever, where it's like the really sleazy, horrible, murky looking kind of Bond film. You know what I'm talking about? Was it the
Sleazy
sleazy
70s,
70s?
Cam
There
would
we
say.
go.
That was
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Like those were kind of, you wanted a shower after watching those, but this one, it's just like, Christ, can we get like a bit of light in here, please? It was like almost I know this came after, but Game of Thrones season 8, episode 3 levels, the Battle of Winterfell, where I'm like, Christ, am I going to have to turn the brightness up on my TV screen to see actually what's going on? Not quite that bad, but in the same ballpark.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good segue because we need to talk about Daniel Craig. This is his fourth film, not his final film. Could have been his final film. That's coming obviously this week. And where do we begin with this? I'm going to jump in. I don't think he has a bad performance in him. I think you can tell he's not engaged in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
And I don't think he is bad in the film. I think he is working with what he's got. We know on record now that he didn't enjoy this film. He said that. He said it in the documentary. They do tee off more of the leg injury, but it's really interesting hearing him in a couple of interviews this week. And I think he did one with, someone from BBC. And he kind of said that, his approach to Bond was that how big it was as a sort of franchise, he wanted to leave the franchise in the same condition he picked it up in terms of like its status on cinema. And it was really interesting hearing that. And I'm just sat there saying, because we're going to get the debate in, it could have been his last film. I think it would have been his last film.
Yeah.
And I don't think he wanted to go out with this being the last Bond film for him. I wouldn't even say money. The leg injury, obviously, I'm not going to judge someone that's filmed a film with a broken leg. That's not my place, but there was a lot of focus on that in the documentary. Of course, with the links this has to No Time to Die, you don't really want your actor to trash the script as well. And whereas Quantum, they can do that because it was 13 years ago, and that storyline has moved on and evolved into Spectre. But it's been really interesting with him this week, and we will talk about the ending shot because I know you brought that up quite a lot, and that does feel like the end of a character arc for Bond, and it feels very rushed and very quick. And rewatching it, it's so not bad, but the story doesn't make sense as to why he would retire. maybe the, and this is sort of talking about No Time to Die Thursday, that they have approached that film as the final Daniel Craig Bond film, which already sets it apart from any other Bond film ever made, because it's never been approached like that before. And here we are with Spectre, where it's like throws in final scene and hints at, does James Bond want to settle down with life? And it's a really interesting one. I think you can tell that he's not, I don't say not enjoying it. All the issues that came around this film, I understand. And even when we knew, every press, he was just getting asked nonstop, are you done? Are you leaving? Have you quit? Are you finished? Are you this? Are you that? I understand why he would say what he has in media. And he has to come out and apologize for some things that may have crossed the line. But looking at him, where we are now in 2021, I'm very much glad he didn't call it a day, because I think he deserves a hell of a lot better than Spectre as a final Bond film. And I hope we're going to get that, by the way.
Yeah, no, and as you keep saying, like, it's mad to think that for the first time ever, we're actually going into a Bond film knowing it's going to be that actor's last, incarnation of Bond. Essentially, it's their last performance as Bond. I could see the fatigue with this one, even watching it back when it originally came out. He just seemed kind of uninterested. Now, I don't think it's an awful performance, but it's always that sort of like Bond fatigue with the actors. You saw it with Connery. You could see it with Moore as well, especially getting towards those later films where it's like, is he getting a little bit too old? Is he getting a little bit past it, kind of thing? And you can make the argument for Brosnan as well, but that was more so like the film quality itself rather than his actual performance in there. But there's always that sense of fatigue as they get more and more into the films, as they keep cranking them out. And I think it was honestly just like a script thing with this one. I don't think he was given much to work with, really, or the story. And I don't know all the stuff that went on behind the scenes. I don't know if there was like a big fallout with Mendes or whatnot. So can't really comment on all that. But yeah, the final scene of the film, that stuck out to me at the time. It's probably one of the most memorable scenes in the film for me. And even on the rewatch, it was almost like a sense of whiplash with this film. I was almost I was almost comatose watching this film, just willing it to be over. And then he's in the DB5 and the music kicks in, and it's like he glances to the Bond girl theme playing in full statement as he drives off into the sunset. And it did honestly feel like that sort of Last Crusade type ending, driving into the sunset, driving into the distance. Who knows what's going to happen with Bond after this? Maybe this could be the last one. And I think if they did decide to leave it on this one, I'm glad they have done another one and he's got like a definitive final one with No Time to Die. But if that had been the final shot, I could see that being sort of like Craig's final shot as Bond right there.
Yeah.
But that is one of the only scenes in the film where it's like, oh my God, yeah, I'm watching a James Bond film. Like it felt, I felt uplifted. It was the theme kicking in. It's like Bond's doing what he's doing and he's doing it the best. But the rest, it almost doesn't match the rest of the film. The rest of the film is just such a slog to get through. And it's just like those final few seconds of the film where you've got that scene, it almost feels like a reshoot. It's just, let's throw that in there. I kind of wanted that to be the whole film, really. That final scene, if you could, all the emotions that I had from those final like 20 seconds of the film, if you could have just like put that across the entire film, you'd have been onto a winner. But it almost feels out of place with how uplifting that final scene is. I'm kind of waffling at this point, but do you know what I mean? It's just tonally, it doesn't feel
totally
in keeping
wrong
with the rest of the film. Yeah, and I don't know if it's earned as well. I mean, that's probably going to be a talking point when we get to the character of Madeleine Swann. When she says the line like, I love you in like 3/4 of the way through the film, I'm like, it feels so manufactured and tacked on, and it doesn't feel earned. And that moment where he's in the car with her at the end, like this is the new Vesper, essentially. This is the new woman I'm going to settle down with for the rest of my life. I'm like, these have had no chemistry at all, and they're trying so desperately hard to make you feel those emotions that the characters are meant to be feeling. And you just don't buy it at the end. So I am glad that he has had another Bond film to do it, and hopefully it will, in 2 days' time, we'll find out whether it is good. I hope it is good. I hope it's a good send-off for him. But yeah, I think this would have left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And I don't know if this is a film that a lot of people were kind of mixed on when it was initially released, or if that's just been a thing that's happened over the subsequent years. I'm not really sure, to be honest, because I think a lot of people were fairly, mixed to positive on this film when it first came out.
Yeah, and that's what's been interesting, is that reapproaching this, because I thought I actively didn't want to watch it, but I did say, oh, well, I'll rewatch it when we did a new film.
Yeah.
That's when it had a November 2019 release date. So, look at us now. And oh yeah, you are right. It's not, the ending isn't earned. Like if they hadn't have had that ending, right? Yeah, I'm not going to talk hypothesis of what could happen in the new film, what won't happen in the new film, but the way I feel with the new film is they can't do him driving off into the sunset because it's now been done. It
Yeah.
has to be something a little bit more definitive. And obviously, the new film is going to I would assume, kickstart maybe not soon after, but we know, it's the whole Jamaica thing we spoke about, that Bond's retired and he's going to have to come out of retirement. That's in the synopsis. That's not a spoiler. So at least that's going to work into the hand for the new film. And that may, what one thing I want to say about Nick is there may be a chance it makes Spectre look better. I'm not assuming it will, but it could, and I'll take that could. I'm not going to go and rewatch Spectre though because of it. But it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because I don't want to be so. We've been, even on Furious Only, we've been this negative, and it is so dabbled when we're so close to new. It's such a fun time revisiting them, and then we do have something like this. And you are right; it's just a struggle to watch, to sit through. And you can, I mean, Daniel Craig, he's quite an honest guy. He feels very shy but proud of his work.
Mm.
And I think when you do have something like this that he's clearly not a fan of, it's probably harder for him to market. As worth mentioning, the first time a Bond actor's got a co-producer credit as well. And obviously, a really big thing is for No Time to Die. We'll obviously get to that, the whole Danny Boyle stuff. He uses power very well to save us from that madman. I would always keep saying, and I'll get into that when we do the video, the spoiler one. But we have to talk about some of the problems in the film, which is really sad because one of the highlights of our Skyfall video was talking about all the allies. The whole new MI6 crew. We've got a new M. We finally got a Moneypenny. We have a Q. Everything's in place for like the Bond episodic, I guess, stories to start. Not that we knew we wouldn't get many, but everything was in place. And then we get the first one with them all in. And you always call it side quests, don't you? The whole, it's bad. And listen, you've got some terrific actors in there that may not be normal character actors that want to jump in, shoot a cameo, and leave for every film. I get that. I really hate how they use all of them. M's got a great scene when he absolutely obliterates Bond after the opening credits. Mexico, what were you doing? All that kind of great Bond, because Judi Dench's M was superb. I'm not going to say anything bad at all. You can't. She's phenomenal. She made that her own. Ralph Fiennes is a return to the old school M. Here is the relationship between the double O and the M, not a maternal one, a working one. And it was really refreshing to get that. And I will say that, sort of grouping it together, that Ralph Fiennes is superb for that scene. But the whole Moriarty stuff is the one of the worst things I think in any Bond film. And this is where I mean, I don't know if I should say it for now with the villain stuff, but this is the key problem of the film is the ultimate villainous plan of Spectre is checks notes, become intelligence, like
implying they don't already have it. Like Spectre should have tabs on all that stuff already, shouldn't they? That's what makes them so terrifying. They're everywhere. They've got knowledge everywhere. Why do they need like a global surveillance thing, implying they don't already have that? Which I thought would be part and parcel with Spectre, to be fair. But
and this is my big problem with the whole MI6 side quest stuff. It's a boring sub story, and also I understand the whole, is intelligence too much for the governments? I get that. We all know about things like that. With drones can do more than a man can. Fine. We got bits of that in Skyfall before, so we're kind of retreading similar steps. The whole Mallory character arc is that he doesn't think double O's are needed.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But he puts his trust in it, and then it's him now doing the rounds. I just think you lose 30 minutes of screen time here, and I think it's trying to be a commentary on real life, which is so unnecessary because you look at Tomorrow Never Dies with Elliot Carver. That's a really interesting. What if the media have power? And in the 90s, they're slowly getting to his super plan is to get 24-hour news TV with China, and everywhere's got 24-hour TV now. So, and you look at Spectre, it's like everything they talk about already exists in our society today, and it's a really wasted plot story from. And it's also the final moments of their super plan is also that, and it's where it derails. The introduction of C/Moriarty, Andrew Scott, again wasted, very good actor, wasted, and then I think they're just trying to get scenes out of the very talented MI6 cast, and you don't need to. They're a superb cast, and they could probably do their scene or two well.
Yeah, and it's like your supporting cast that you had in Skyfall felt they were utilized the right amount. I thought they kind of worked into the story well, and they felt a part of the story. They felt like integral to the parts that needed to be there. Whereas this one, the whole subplot with these characters just feels crowbarred into the film just to give them something to do. I was watching this film and I was thinking, like, could you lift any of these scenes out? And I honestly think you could, because ultimately, Andrew Scott's character, we may as well talk about him now, because I know
Yeah.
that, it is in the villain section later, but he ties in with this so much. He's a great actor. Andrew Scott is fantastic. The stuff with BBC Sherlock, and honestly, that is the only thing that I've seen him in other than this. But I'm sure he's done, like a whole bunch more stuff. But he's basically playing the same character. And I think what it is as well is that the newer Bond films, you could say, have tried to be a bit more intelligent with their script writing, with their screenwriting, their ideas and everything. Whereas this one, you've just got a transparently evil, slimy side character who has no redemption, has no real character arc or anything like that. He's a bad guy from the beginning, and he ends exactly that way. And what kind of capped it off for me as well, it just feels like so much of an afterthought, all that stuff. You have Bond sort of quizzing Blofeld at the end, where it turns out that Blofeld's plan is in keeping. He's using the character of C as like a puppet to get what he wants ultimately. And Bond's like, "So what does C get out of this?" And he's just like, "Oh, nothing." It's like, so C doesn't even have a motivation as a character, and it's just every time it keeps cutting to that whole side of the story. There's no tension there. It's just so transparent what they're trying to do, and I get it. They're trying to bring in the real world stuff, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Like you just mentioned the Tomorrow Never Dies thing, and I think that was a really good comparison right there. In that was one of the I was singing that film's praises for that connection that they brought in with Carver's character and the whole news network, because it felt so different and fresh, and
Yeah.
has stayed the test of time as well as a villain. And this is going back to like the script writing thing for this one. I think this is honestly probably one of the weakest areas of the script, in just how almost pantomime villain Andrew Scott's written in this film. And I just think the dialogue, I mean, you've got the cast you've got in this, Ralph Fiennes, Naomi Harris, all the usual suspects that you had in the previous film, all fantastic actors, and the material they're given to work with in this is almost laughably bad. It's almost like they had to pen this, like they didn't have a script and they had to like hastily write it down before they rolled the cameras. Some of the interplay as well between Fiennes and Scott in this is just, it's so
Awful.
cringeworthy, it's so bad. And
There's
again,
one good
like,
scene. One good
yeah,
scene with them. That's all I'm going to
one
give
good
it to.
line, and that's probably going to be one
Yeah,
of my lines later. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we'll get to it.
But it,
And
it
it's a
almost,
missed opportunity still.
yes, it is. Yeah, they should have cut the scene a little bit shorter. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But it feels like a different writing team, because it feels so bad. And you could say that that's kind of like a widespread issue of the film as a whole, like just the script in general. But I think if you're going to sort of like zoom in on like a microcosm of the worst writing in the film, it's this whole side quest with these characters. Absolutely. And they try and manufacture it and to like tie it into like the big bombastic finale of the film, don't they? With the building and the explosion, and you just don't care. You don't care about C. You don't care about any of that stuff. You just want to get to Bond. You want to get to Blofeld, and you want to get to like the rest of the story. Um, that being said, I think that Q's a lot better in this film. Not to say he was bad in the other one, but I love some of the interplay with Q and Bond in this one a whole lot more. We get more of the gadget side of things, and
Yeah.
when Bond says, "Oh, give me some time," and I can't remember the exact line, but he says that, "Oh, for the first 24 hours, you might experience some technical," and he kind of looks at him like, "Give me more time." He's like, "Oh, for the first 48 hours, there might be some connectivity issues with the GPS tracking or whatnot." But again, that feels like a retread as well. Like we need to keep eyes on Bond. Like, didn't they do that in Casino
Casino
Royale with
Royale. Yeah,
the
the
implant?
same
Like,
joke.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
and
owl. Yeah,
it's like, oh, now we've got nanotech. I was like, bloody hell, here we go again. I mean, this was before Avengers and all that, but
yeah, yeah,
oh, it is wasted. It's wasted with them, and sort of talking about Moriarty. The problem is, it's Andrew Scott, right? It's not his performance. Sorry, I must add. Okay, we've cast Andrew Scott. He's a very talented actor. He's just been one of the most, I'd say, not iconic of all time TV characters, but he's just made an iconic Moriarty performance. I
yeah.
don't know if Moriarty's a Blofeld yet, but in terms of here's an iconic performance, here's him, one on one with Cumberbatch, and he won essentially. And he's really out there. He's really interesting. I know he's got stage backgrounds. I know that is it Fleabag? I know that was before or after Spectre with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. He plays one of the main characters, and it's like, okay, we're going to cast him. He's a great villain. Okay, we can't even play Moriarty. No. Right. So to make him not be obvious a villain, we're casting an actor currently known for being a villain, being a very fluorescent out there villain, and we're just going to make him tame. It'd be like casting Christopher Lee and being like, Christopher Lee, be really nice in this film. because we know you're going to end up being the villain because you're just too. I mean, that's a really unfair comparison, actually, but
He played a
you
lot
know
of
what I mean?
villains. Like he said that was one of
Yeah,
the thing with Christopher Lee. He always had to play the villain.
yeah, exactly. And you couldn't imagine. It's like the whole Lord. Imagine if it was actually Gandalf. You'd be like, you'd still expect Gandalf to stab you in the back at some point, and that's the whole thing, isn't it? That
Yeah.
with Moriarty in this, it's like you are too well known, and the writing is too poor, and your story arc is too similar to Mallory from Skyfall to
Mhm.
not be the villain. And by keeping Andrew Scott so tame, he just feels miserable in the film. That is like everything's like a really like I can't really do his voice or anything, but it's like, oh, double O's are a thing of the past. I'm sorry, don't take it personally. And
There's the democracy
it's like
thing as well, isn't there? There's like
yeah,
that moment where it's like, I love democracy, and he's just like, oh,
yeah, and
democracy, pa pa. Like this, it's like,
it's just
oh, this is so bad.
and
Like, what
even
is this
his
shit?
death isn't worthy of the plot. Like, I'm not saying you need Ralph Fiennes to kill a man, but you got Lord Voldemort and a man like wobbling with the arms like, on a
Yeah,
ledge.
he does like the whole
He doesn't
whoa,
even
whoa,
kick.
whoa,
He
whoa.
doesn't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
kick him. He doesn't shoot him. He doesn't punch him. He doesn't say anything. It's like, how can you let Ralph Fiennes be there and not let him have? And because it doesn't matter how bad the story arc is. At least if there'd been a superb death, that's something to talk about. But it's pathetic. And I think you said the other day, isn't it, that it's Tanner that gets the liner, which is like,
Oh, yeah.
is it he's dead?
He's
It's
dead.
like
He
he's
falls
only
off.
fell down like 50 flights of stairs.
He falls off a fucking skyscraper and splats on the ground, and like I think Em even looks over the edge and just sees like the blood starting to pool on the floor. Then it cuts back to them later on when they're on the ground, and it's just like he's like checking his pulse on the ground. Like, he's basically a bloody pulp on the floor. He's like, he's dead. It's like, wow, wow, Tanner, that's mate, how did you get this job? Christ almighty. It's so bad. So,
And
so bad.
that's like 25, 30 minutes of the film, all of that, because Bond's not in many of those scenes at all. You can have a character like C be around and be like, oh, we can't have things go wrong. They might see these terrorist incidents. If you don't have C, you could probably still do that storyline, but they do it anyway, and it's time wasted. And in a 2.5 hour film, I mean, I say you don't have the time. You got too much time, and that is when you get to that thing. Right, this has got to go. This 25 minutes here has got to go, and it didn't. And I think that's the problem, is that you think you've done everything with Blofeld, and it's like, oh no, now go back to London for another Blofeld thing. And I think that's the problem, and you end up wasting the MI6 crew for it because it was so well set up in Skyfall, and I just think that the film didn't deliver with that after.
I think it takes away from the finale as well, like the impact of the ending. Because honestly, I think the ending to this film is really weak in terms of like your big final act of the film. But it's almost like you've got two climaxes going on at the same time. You've got all the stuff with Bond and the Blofeld stuff and trying to rescue the Bond girl, and then it constantly keeps cutting back to the side quest, as I keep calling it, with C, and they've built him up to be like a big villain throughout it as well. So you've got these two moments going on clashing with each other, and I think the two kind of like negate the impact of each other, and the main focus should be Bond and what's going on with that with your main villain. And yeah, so I think the two, not only is it poorly written, that the whole character of C stuff, but I do think it takes away from the overall impact of where the focus of the story should be, which is James Bond and the main villain and what he's going after.
Yeah, exactly. Shall we talk about a returning character?
Yes, let's do
As
it.
well?
Is in significantly less than I remember him being, in all honesty, because he was all
Yes,
over the trailers.
trailers. The return of Mr. White. We need to talk. One of the greatest lines said by Daniel Craig is
Oh,
Bond.
I thought you meant by Mr. White in the trailer. The often misheard
Oh,
line
this
from the
is it. This is
trailer.
where we've got to bring up. It's the when they announced Mr. White's come back, I was like, this is really cool. That I don't mind them tying universes together. Quantum becoming Spectre is like an assumption that we knew would probably have happened,
Mhm.
rather than a big reveal. We'll get to the Skyfall stuff later, but bringing back Mr. White, I really enjoyed. It's a lovely little tie-in. It's interesting to see what he got up to because he did get away, and he's aged and he's got like black eyes, and it's all really edgy and depressing. And I really enjoyed having him back. It's in a creepy lair. He's got cameras. He's waiting to die, and as you said, we got the immortal trail line. You're a kite in a hurricane, Mr. Bond. A moment where many people had to rewind it and think, did they just put the C word in a Bond trailer?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe C stands for kites, who knows? But yeah, I liked his scene. I thought he was really good in it. He did a great. I mean, we'll get to Spectre later, but he did a great way of building up Spectre to be more powerful than what they were. That if this man's afraid of them, then you should be afraid as well. Unfortunately, it does set up one of the least interesting characters at present.
Oh yeah, it does, and it's the film's need to to connect everything, isn't it? Not just the villains, but oh no, the villain had this daughter all along who was never mentioned, and none of this was mentioned before, and it kind of feels like a retcon even in this respect as well. I don't know if this was a deleted scene from Quantum of Solace or if it was like an original idea, but I heard rumors, or I think I read somewhere that there was an ending with Mr. White. It was either planned or it was shot, where in the epilogue of the film he was killed by Bond, and that sort of like completed the whole Casino Royale story. They chose not to use it, or it never even came to fruition. I'm not sure which one it is. So it kept the door open essentially to bring his character back and to conclude his story in some other respect. And obviously, it's concluded with this one. I think it is good that they brought him back, and I think that's a sort of, it's not even a retcon, that's a continuation that makes sense to me. It's not like in the same respect as you have like a Silver, for example, where that feels so not part of the idea. Having Mr. White come back and kind of setting him on his quest, that's absolutely fine. I like that he's kind of been poisoned as well by Spectre. I don't know if you could argue that it's maybe out of character for him, because it's a little bit weak, the excuse that they give in the film, but they say like, oh, he got crazy. Spectre just the whole thing got too crazy. They got too evil, so I had to just take a step and like back out of it. I'm like, at what point did you not think they were like an evil organization, like the overlords over everything? So that was a little bit weak, I thought. Like, oh, Blofeld changed, man. He's changed. He's got off the rails. I'm like, come on, like he's been the head of this thing from the beginning, and he's always been evil. Like, don't try and pull the wool over my eyes. Like, I know what's going on. But there is a weird bit as well, and it's, obviously he commits suicide, doesn't he? He pulls the trigger, blows his brains out. That comes back up later, and it's like the whole intelligence thing, like Blofeld's got cameras everywhere, and he's playing it on all screens all around, and it's where you've got Madeleine Swann's character, and Bond's like very earnest. He's like, look at me, don't look at the screens. And I thought, wouldn't it have been cool if like Bond had have killed Mr. White in that moment, and he didn't want her to see that Bond had actually killed her father or something like that? I'm like, she hated her father. There was no love lost between her and her father. So I mean, I guess like she probably doesn't want to see her dad blow her brains out. Like, I get it, and he was trying to shield her from that. But how big and pivotal that scene seems to be built up to at that point. I don't know if it would have made more dramatic sense that Bond was the one who pulled the trigger, avenging Vesper and completing that whole casino story. And then when he falls in love with her daughter and they're having that connection and she trusts him, to see on the screen Bond killing her father in that moment in cold blood. I don't know. Maybe that would have added like an extra dynamic there, but it feels like it's built up, and it's like, well, what's the payoff here? Like, why should I care? Like, I don't know.
When I was watching it again, I was like, have Spectre like photoshopped it to make it like he killed him and he hadn't all along? Like,
that's what it feels like. Yeah,
it feels like it's a big moment that she wants. That there's going to be a relation. You get none of it, and it just leaves you off. And the whole Mr. White, like, it's a great death. It's a great, how quick he is with the gun as well. He doesn't hang about with it. There are crows on the body as well later. And the funny thing is, like, they make a massive deal of the cameras as well in the house. Like, there's a bright red light in any scene with them on. Like, he knew he's being recorded, but yeah, bringing Mr. White back 100% made sense. And again, when you have the connective tissues, I'm going to make a point I've not said yet, but we spoke about how the Dark Knight influenced Skyfall, right? And that was what, 4 years before? What came out in 2012 that every film started doing in the years that followed? You had Avengers, the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Kong v Godzilla eventually got there.
The Dark Universe, remember that one?
Didn't get there. Dark Universe never even started. DC has failed. Accept it, folk. Obviously, Marvel's done fine. Even Star Wars hasn't really done it. They don't need to do it. They're too big. And I think this was Bond's attempt that, it was all the stories together. Now, that might look great heading into No Time to Die, that it was all a connected tissue, because it does make the Craig era very knitted in, which I think will look back in the future as a really interesting Bond. In the same way we approached Dalton about there was something he tried to do and the world wasn't ready for that 80s fit Bond yet.
Yeah.
And I think Craig, we can look back in 10 years and be like, this was a story arc of James Bond, which we've never had. And I really, I hope the last one will deliver on that. But this is the one where they're threading it all together, and some of it is just nonsensical. Skyfall is the biggest crime of this, Silver. Don't care what's said, what's tried to be defended. You can have connective tissues to Skyfall. You can do it in other ways other than saying that Silver was one of you all along. Absolutely fucking not accepting that, not believing it. That's the only time you're going to get me really vexed, because that's the, I said, like, the film when it first came out, that was still the bits in that got me. It's like no, Silver just wanted to kill him. His plan wasn't intelligent domination. He had intelligence. He could, in theory, he could have worked for them. He said, I can do this, I can do that, I can overthrow governments. Fine. It'd be like Goldfinger coming out the year after and being like, oh yeah, Goldfinger was actually a Spectre agent the entire time. But no, he wasn't. He had his own plan. They're just telling us he had, and it gets me vexed. I don't want to talk about Spectre. Should be talking about
It
Mr.
makes
Right.
for a good trailer line, though, doesn't it? Like, it was me, James, the author of all
It's
your
a great
pain.
line.
Everything bad that's happened to you was at my bidding. And it's the thing is, if you don't connect it to, I can see what was going through their head. If you don't connect it to Skyfall, think, well, what would he have connected to then? Okay, he was connected to Vesper dying in Casino Royale, and then you had Quantum,
Yep.
which pretty much took place right after that. What else? Like M dying was like a big pivotal moment in like Bond's life, and you could say like arguably like the other woman in his life in a way. So if you don't connect it to
I know.
Skyfall, then it feels very small potatoes, doesn't it? Like, it was me, James, all along. It's like, well, we
4
got
years
that
ago,
from
or 7
Quantum of
years ago,
Solace.
sorry.
Yeah, like that one moment, that one woman who died, who at the end of Quantum he kind of gets over anyway, and sort of like puts that part of his life behind him. So I get like the immediate effect of needing to connect it to Skyfall, but in the same time, you really cheapen Skyfall. And I
Yep.
think you really, in hindsight, you go back to that film and there's nothing remotely set up in that film. It would be one thing if they actually did say that, Silver was part of or had some dealings with Spectre,
Well,
or,
this is it. You
Quantum.
could do
He dabbled with
something,
Quantum at the time, but the
but for
fact that it
him to
doesn't.
be, he is one of you,
Yeah.
and it's like taking credit for his scheme. I just can't accept that. And then it sounds
And
a
there's
bit,
the pictures on the wall at
denial.
the end when he's walking
Yeah.
down that corridor, and you've got Lashif, and you've got, oh, I always forget his name, the dude from Quantum, and then you've got Silver
Dominic.
there. And he's a recognizable face, isn't he? He is, like, in terms
That's
of
it.
villains, he's huge. So I get what they were trying to do, but I still don't know how that got off the ground, because it does kind of ruin the sort of like the magic, the unique magic that Skyfall is in it being its own film. And
But it didn't. It
yeah.
didn't feel like that on the rewatch of Skyfall, though. And I did say to you, that was what I was worried about with Skyfall, was that if I'd have gone into Skyfall and been like, "Oh, he was Spectre all along," but Agatha, that would have ruined it. Whereas I can watch Return of the Jedi now, be like, the Emperor's apparently not dead, and
Yeah.
that is a big thing that has hit me, that I have to accept that. Oh, he's not dead.
I don't accept it.
I no,
I don't
and
accept that.
this is it, isn't it? This is, and I can't accept that either. And this is where I'm like, but it hasn't ruined Empire, Return of the Jedi, but that's a big thing now. Whereas I didn't watch Skyfall and just sat there in any pivotal scene thinking, that's a Spectre agent. Now, if he had a ring on for the entire film, you've won me over, guys.
Yeah.
But because they say, this is what annoys me more. Sorry to keep ranting. When Q does the ID thing, when like
That's it.
the
Yeah.
DNA tissue,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what a convenient ring. That ring has been worn by every character you met with. There's only a couple of hundred Spectre members, but all of them just happen to wear this exact ring now.
So all those people at
like
Tosca in the opera, were they like passing around this ring, like, oh, I'm going to try this on. It's got my DNA.
This is
in it.
it.
I'll pass it around to that guy. Like,
did they take it off Lashif's body? Like, did Mr. White shoot Lashif in the head? Just grab
I
the
didn't even
ring
think about that.
and just like give it to Green. And then, when they shot Green in the desert, they take the ring off him, but like, here you go, Silver. And did they like find Silver's body, nab the ring, and be like, here you go, Mr. Skiara?
And why would they want something that gets all of their DNA on, and even if it did fall into the wrong hands, gets them all traced? Like, why would Spectre have something like that? It doesn't make a lick of sense. It's terrible. Yeah. It's all done in that way to connect everything, really closely knit. Which I guess could take us onto the Bond girls, not onto the one who is connected to everything. Shall we talk about one of the biggest missed opportunities in this film, which is Monica
maybe
Bellucci.
of all the Bond?
Yeah, absolutely. So Monica Bellucci as the character of Lucia Sciarra. I think it was actually Tomorrow Never Dies, wasn't it? Bellucci was originally touted to be in as yeah, that's it. When she would have been killed off, but still a memorable character, probably way more memorable of a character than the character in this film. And, you know, again, she was all over the trailers. You know, there was the big deal. Oh, she's the oldest Bond girl we've had. I think she was 50 at the time of this. She looks absolutely stunning. She's incredible. And she's by far the best actress in this film out of the two Bond girls that we're presented with. And it's the whole Rome sequence, like, you know, I get it, you know, in M's message, that's a big thing as well. M's message, I didn't remember that last time. In her will, she's like, oh yeah, in case I die, go to this person, assassinate him, and don't miss the funeral. It's like, well, why didn't you tell Bond that in your dying breath then in Skyfall if it was such a big deal that happened? Um, so it's just functional to the plot, isn't it? You know, he goes there, he kind of learns about the Spectre organization and that her husband was tied to it, and it kind of gears him up to go to that initial Spectre meeting. And then she's just dropped. You know, he makes out with her in typical Bond fashion, and that's it. She's out of the movie. And it's such a shame because you could make the argument for Skyfall as well. You know, the I've forgotten the actress's name and the characters. Severine, wasn't it? Was it Severine in Skyfall? Brilliant performance, fantastic actress, but she is off so quickly. But that's such a great character moment, and what that says for Silver and Bond in that moment as well. And we had that discussion, you know, last week when we talked about that. But you don't get any of that side of things with this character. She's in it, she appears, she's out the movie, and we move on. And I know that Bond's no stranger to that. You know, there's plenty of Bond girls that might only get like a small little to do, but I think when you have an actress of the caliber of Monica Bellucci, and she's great in this as well, she brings a real subtlety and a sympathy to a character with loads of layers, and she feels like a really complex character. She's a character that you want to see stick around. And honestly, I wouldn't have had a problem with her being the main Bond girl if she went along on the adventure, like the whole, oh, she's the oldest Bond girl. I don't care. She can act circles around. And I'm not even going to say the actress is bad who plays Madeleine Swann, because I know she's a great actress, but again, the material in this is terrible. But in context of the film, she's so much more interesting than the character of Madeleine Swann. And I think that Bond has way more chemistry with the character of Lucia than he even does with Madeleine Swann. And, you know, this is the woman at the end of the film that he's meant to fall in love with, or she's meant to fall in love with him. And we see that carrying over into, you know, in the trailers for No Time to Die. It's such a missed opportunity. And, you know, some of that Rome stuff is the most beautiful stuff in the film, like the way it's shot, just Rome as a location. I don't think has been done in any of the previous Bond films, has it? So it seems like a huge location that I'm very surprised they haven't got to at any other point before this point. You know, it's the romantic city and all of that, and those are where the Bondisms are really coming through in that scene, and it's just over and done so quickly with her character. So it's a real shame, and especially because she's been touted for so long to be in a Bond film, and she finally gets the gig, and that's the best that they can give her. It's a shame.
It is the biggest wasted potential from this film, and I don't like. I always uncomfortably laugh at the scene at the funeral. I love how it's shot. I love Craig like rocking up to the funeral of the man he killed in this like stunning coat. I've got to give him credit. It's like Craig can wear sunglasses and a nice long coat. Very Italian.
Yeah.
And then Monica Bellucci is like, "Can't you see I'm mourning?" And I'm like,
no.
"Are you
No,
meant to be sarcastic?" Like I don't. I don't know if it's a bad performance again, or is it just an awful script? Like, what a terrible line to put a funeral.
Oh, I think we've lost George a little bit. Is he going to come back?
Oh, apologies, my internet cut out then.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
All it is, it's just wasted potential with it. Where you know the scene that she has, and then she's just gone. And I love the whole shot of her almost deaf, the music playing, standing by the pool, ready for it. Craig coming in, the silent assassin. I love that stuff, and he used it to get the information, and then we get a bit I forgot about. Call my friend Felix. I'm like, we could have got Jeffrey Wright. We could have got Jeffrey Wright. Like we were on the verge. We could have had him again, and it's a lovely little line. I'll give it that. Yeah, and it's just you know, and it does set up a great stuff. I will say, all the interesting stuff to me was in Italy. That whole first, I don't even know if it's big enough to be a first act, but yeah, absolutely wasted it. And talking about Madeleine Swann, now I don't know if you remember this. She was in Mission Impossible 4, Rogue Nation. I think it's a Rogue Nation, or no, Ghost Protocol, and she played like she's like a femme fatale villain. She ends up getting like kicked out of a window.
Oh,
but she's really good.
Yeah,
she's really good at being a femme fatale, and she kills people. She can fight, and I mean, I wouldn't say when Spectre came out, you were getting the Mission Impossible Bond comparisons, but we certainly are now. Obviously, there's been like what 2 or 3 Mission Impossible films since this came out,
Mhm.
um, and I think they've wasted her. Lisa is a very, very highly regarded French actress. She's done a lot of indie stuff. She's done some blockbusters, and I'm gonna. I don't know. If this sounds ageist. I'm just gonna say I think she was too young to
Yeah.
play the wife. Well, is she a wife to be, the romantic interest that Bond will leave his job for? I think she was horrifically miscast. I'm going to give her another shot because we are getting in the new one, but I do that as an issue heading in, and I just don't think the pair of them have that much chemistry. And I don't want to be ageist to Craig. It's not anything like a Roger Moore thing either. But and I had this thought, and I hate doing fan casting. But could you imagine if that was someone like Marion Cotillard, who was like also a very talented French actress who
Oh yeah,
is a
now you're talking. Yeah,
similar age
yeah,
to
yeah.
Daniel, well, maybe a couple of years younger, but she for the story they went with, I just think she was too young to be the settle down Bond character. Again, please prove me wrong at no time to die because I'm more than open to it, but I just think Madeleine Swann is horrifically misused. I think you've wasted a very talented actress. And it just didn't work. Again, I think a lot of that is on the script to magically be in love.
Mhm.
When she's like, I've got to leave you. I can't have this in my life anymore. Bond's there,
What?
like,
Yeah.
what? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, when did you say you can have it in life anymore? It's and there's some interesting things, and what they say. I'm not going to prelude No Time to Die, but they do say that she did a 2-year degree at Oxford. Was it in medical studies?
Yeah.
Who knows if that could end up being something gets played into the next film? If theories about plot points and connections could be made. I'm not going to say them here, but it was very interesting on the rewatch. I mentioned it in the No Time to Die video if anything ties into it, but horrifically misused, and it's a shame. It's a
Mhm.
shame because, as I said, she's a talented actress, and also, again, it's also the Monica Bellucci stuff. I'd have rather, even if it was for 2 acts. And I think the beauty of Skyfall is that you have a Bond girl for the opening act, and you get M. They showed that Camille showed you don't need to have Bond just sleep with people. You can have a character that's involved in the story, and just have her as a character. And it doesn't feel quite right for the Craig era with it. Again, I might get proven wrong this week, but I think Madeleine Swann is a. Also, sorry, I've got to say, when Blofeld blows into the wall and draws a swan, that just really threw me off guard.
Yeah.
I was just thinking it then, but yeah, I'm sorry, I'm waffling now. I'm going to
No,
hand it
no,
over. I
no.
just think it's just horrifically misused.
I'm completely on board with you there as well. And I was just checking the ages as well to see at the time of filming how old they would have been, and it was almost a 20-year age difference between her and Daniel Craig. Not to say there's anything wrong with that or anything, but
I didn't think it was that big. I thought it was like 15.
no, it's 20. It was almost pushing 20. It was getting there. But it's also the fact as well. I mean, she's 36 now. She doesn't look it. She looks incredibly young, even still,
Yeah,
doesn't she? You see the trailers now, and is she the first recurring Bond girl? I'm trying to think if she is, like, making
I
it
believe
across
so.
2 films. I think she might be.
As
Not
as
not
a as a
counting,
character,
like Vesper, flashbacks and
yeah.
quick clips here, like, not counting that, I think she's probably the first, which is a big deal, in terms of, like, the Bond canon and the Bond continuity and everything, but I hope they go into her character more, and from the trailers, it looks like they are, but, I mean, that was her setup film, Spectre, right? And over 2.5 hours they've made me not give a shit about her character. And honestly, like, there have been worse Bond girls out there. Well, actually, she's just so dull. Like, even some of the other Bond girls that aren't, like Tiffany Case, who is one of the most
Yeah.
reviled Bond girls out of all of them. I could still talk about her character and personality and scenes that she actually did in that film, where she switches the tape, the machine gun, whatever. She had more of a personality and charisma than Madeleine Swann does in this film. So honestly, Madeleine Swann might be again sort of like bottom of the barrel for me, or maybe not the bottom, getting close to it at least. There's just nothing to her character. I couldn't tell you anything about her personality, her quirks, anything, anything at all. She's just so uncharismatic, and it is that on-screen, that sort of like unspoken on-screen chemistry with Bond as well. And when you see Daniel Craig and you see Eva Green together in Casino Royale, you see it. They have instant chemistry. They look great together. Even going to Octopussy as well, where you have Maud Adams and you have Roger Moore. I don't know what the age difference was between them. I think we said that Maud Adams was, quite a bit younger than him at the time, but she looked maturer, didn't she? I think when we said when you get to Octopussy, and they look great together, and you buy it. This is kind of awkward, and I was kind of picking up on that sort of like age difference, and I think also because you have, not to bring age too much into it, but you have Monica Bellucci, who you go from as like the oldest Bond girl. She doesn't look it, but that's where you get that chemistry. When you see her and Craig together, I got that chemistry, that unspoken chemistry between those two characters. And then you offset it with probably one of the youngest Bond girls, I want to say, maybe with Madeleine Swann. It's just awkward, and there was so much potential with that first one that kind of also has a negative knock-on effect with the second one, because we've spent so much time in Rome and establishing that in our first act, and then she's kind of introduced in probably in the second act, when you get to Austria, but there's just nothing to her, like even in terms of that sort of like damsel in distress thing, which ultimately she is at the film. I didn't care. There was no tension for me. I
Yeah,
didn't care. She could have blew up in that building and I wouldn't have given two shits, and that's a problem
and it
because
was
you're meant
thrown
to be
in.
rooting for Bond. Yeah.
It was so awfully thrown in as well that, oh, she's walked out. Of course, she's not going to walk out because Blofeld is everywhere and he will have his master plan to get her.
Yeah.
And you just don't care. And again, I don't think it's the actor's fault. I think it's what they're working with. I think it's the way the stories are written. I think it even makes Blofeld look a bit pathetic that he would go for the damsel in distress type ending. That
Hmm.
do you want to die saving her in the wreckage, or do you just want to get out here? And it's like that was a Vespa, 100%. You'd see it, and
Mm.
it's again, it's the natural chemistry that Eva Green has so much chemistry with Daniel Craig. It was like unbelievable, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why they work so well. It's so believable, but I just don't have any of that with Liz. Like, even Severine in Skyfall, there's chemistry there.
Yeah. Loads.
Even though it's
Loads.
them
Yeah.
playing off against each other, there's some chemistry, and it never delivers on it. And I said I want them to prove me wrong, and I really hope they do because I think both actors deserve better. And the film, again, his legacy depends on this next film. I think he's got a safe legacy anyway, but as a cinematic story arc, a lot's going to depend on him. If they've given him more writing soon, I once again jump to the
Mm.
fact that yes, there's still Purvis and Wade, but Phoebe Waller-Bridge has gone over a lot of the dialogue in the film as well. Obviously, I've not seen Fleabag, but wins countless awards, and she's really starting to get into a lot of projects. And as well, you've got to think that Fukunaga was writing in it as well. Of course, a True Detective, one of the greatest character studies ever in television, season one.
Mm.
So, I'm very optimistic, but it's a big ask. It's probably the biggest ask they've needed heading into the film is to bring back a Bond girl and it be one of the least cared for or least
Mm.
developed ones.
And I don't think it all sort of like, there might be more layers to the character, but that's done after the fact. I don't see it like making me come round to her character in
Yeah,
Spectre because it is what we're presented with the film, and what we're presented isn't great. I think it's a double whammy, to be honest. I think it's number one, the script, as we keep going back to. I don't think her parts are particularly well written, and great actress notwithstanding, I think she was miscast in this role. To be honest, I think you need to sort of like age her up a little bit, give her a bit more personality, a bit like a memorable quality. Like as I say, like if you ask me to describe her character, shit, I wouldn't even know where to start, to be honest. I'd be drawing a blank from the off, and that's bad, especially in one of the longest Bond films as well. It's not great, and there's so much focus on her as well. And it's like this is meant to be the new Vesper. Like, I don't know. And it's as you said, like those familiar plot points, like the whole damsel in distress thing, like Blofeld in the big castle at the end, like I have captured your girl, Mr. Bond, and that's also probably one of my negatives with this film as well, which I think probably takes us into the villains if we want to start talking about Blofeld now. Christoph Waltz, again, phenomenal, world-class actor, but I can't help but feeling similar to what we said about the whole Moriarty thing.
yeah,
Was it done in, retaliation to Inglorious Bastards and Django Unchained, two massive films, kind of two films that put Christoph Waltz on the map, really, I would say. I know that he'd done, loads of films before that point, but definitely in the public limelight, being in those two Quentin Tarantino films really kind of like brought him to the forefront and made people aware of him all the more. Great actor, and I think good casting for Blofeld as well. Once again,
yeah.
it's those damn script and story problems, isn't it? There's just nothing. There's nothing memorable or threatening about his character, really. And for a character like Blofeld that has so much potential, and you look at those, the earlier Bond films, they probably didn't have a plan, did they? You see his appearance in, is it From Russia with Love? You have like the boardroom scenes. I'm not sure if it's in that film in particular, but they went through so many different voices, didn't they? And when you get to Donald Pleasance in You Only Live Twice, that ain't the Blofeld that we've seen sort of like be in the shadows or the silhouettes or whatnot. But he's still so memorable. And even when you get to that reveal in that film, regardless of, how you rank Donald Pleasance as a Blofeld character, it's memorable and it's impactful because you've earned it and you've got to that point. I know they couldn't sort of like do that because of the whole Spectre thing and the character of Blofeld. Otherwise, they could have probably teased him from maybe movie 2 or even the first film, maybe, and have that be that gradual process. That being said, his introductory scene is fantastic. It's probably one of my favorite. It's probably one of my favorite just in terms of how it's shot as well.
Yeah.
The really darkly lit boardroom scene with all the people from all the corners of the globe as part of the Spectre organization. The silence as well. There's no music. There's no villain theme. It's just that echoey room that they're in. I think that's really effective, which is ruined by the awful cuckoo line and this whole metaphor. This whole cuckoo thing is, again, it's going back to that sort of like Sam Mendes artsiness. It's like, we've got this idea, this grandiose, thought-provoking idea, this metaphor of, these two growing up and one not belonging in the nest. So it's like the cuckoo of getting rid of it. It's like, I get what you're trying to do. And they just keep hitting you with this metaphor all the way through, even to the point where you have like his evil lair villain base in the desert, and he's in Bond strapped to that weird dentist chair thing. Like we'll talk about that in a second because that deserves its own talking point in and of itself. And they still bring it up, and it's not just that. You have the meteorite metaphor as well, where you have them stood opposite it, and it's framed. It's like, I get what you're trying to do. And it's the whole it's the Dark Knight thing. It's like the unstoppable force meets an immovable object. It crashed here, yes, but the earth stopped it. And it's just so on the nose, and it's that sort of like artsiness that is probably more prevalent in this film than it is in Skyfall to me, and it just rubs me up the wrong way. And it's so transparent with what they're trying to do. And I think, sort of like going back to what I mentioned about like the Moorisms, like the sofa scene, the pushing the car along scene in Rome, a lot of the villain stuff in this feels like it's ingredients and elements from some of those earlier Bond films, but it doesn't gel because this is for a modern Bond. This is, for the 2010s Bond. And it doesn't work. You've going back to Casino Royale, one of my favorite bits, just how subversive that film is. It feels like a Bond film, but yet it's going completely in a different direction. It's modernized. You have your hero villain torture scene, right? And what would you have in all the other Bond films? You'd have the crazy contraption, the weird sci-fi elements they bring into it, whether it's a laser or whatever it happens to be. You do away with all that. You strip it back. It's just Bond strapped to a chair in a really vulnerable position with that rope. And as I said, it's the scene that makes every guy cross their legs every time they watch that scene, right? And there's that brilliant line by Le Chiffre where he says, I can't remember it verbatim, but he says, there's no point in all these crazy contraptions and torture devices. You just bring it down to its base level, just causing pain to someone. And then in a few films' time, you just do away with that completely and you go back to sort of like the classic devices. And what is that device? It's like a drill that is going to like hit certain nerve points that's, it's like, if I hit this one, it's going to make you go blind. If I hit this one, it's going to lobotomize you and you're not going to recognize everyone. And there's no tension to it because I think Bond gets drilled like 3 times and there's nothing. There's no ramifications. It doesn't nullify him. He's absolutely fine. And that looks agonizing when that's drilling into his cranium or his brain, or I don't even know where it's drilling into, but it looks painful. And when Blofeld's like going through all this rigmarole and everything, bringing up the cuckoo thing, and there's a line as well, I may as well say it now. Do you know any other bird calls Franz? And it's so cringy. I actually think the scariest thing in the scene probably is the fact that Blofeld wears foot pumps with no socks. That's probably the scariest thing for me in the film that he does. It feels like a waste of potential. You do the whole like costume bad guy thing at the end where he gets blown up and he's got the dead eye with a scar over his face, and it's like you're trying to do the Donald Pleasance appearance. Like,
that's
I get
fine,
it, but
though.
that's fine. But it's just a lot of his motivations.
Yeah, the whole
the Joker and Riddler house rigged with explosives at the end with all these pictures. It does feel like something from like one of the Arkham games to me, like your big villain base at the end, and it doesn't feel right in the tone that the Craig films were setting out to be these more realistic Bond films, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And you've missed out the biggest talking point is
Yeah.
that
Oh yeah. Go on.
they're brothers. Um,
Yeah.
it's again, Blofeld on paper. You've just got the rights to Spectre. Okay, we need this sort of the most evil man in the world that's European. Christoph Waltz is a pretty good actor as understatement for supporting roles as a villain. Even if anyone saw the Green Hornet reboot, he was some reason in that, and I saw it, and he was all right in it. He had
He's done
weird,
some bad
yeah,
films, like Three
yeah. He
Musketeers.
has
Like,
done some
not a
bad
great
films.
film, but
He
yeah.
he had actually, ironically, he had a gun in that film that has two barrels, and Batista has one in this. Don't think it's an
Oh,
intentional
nice.
reference to the Green Hornet, but no, as you said, beautifully shot entrance, really intimidating, and even the sort of Spectre thing. I know this is a bit psychotic. I just love the fact that Craig just stumbled into this meeting, and we've successfully blown up this country, we've successfully done this terrorist attack, and we've got this happening, and it's like, yeah, like this is really how evil board meetings should go. I don't mind that.
Hmm.
And then obviously, he comes in, it's the tension, the silence, the odd speaking, the speech to James, love all that. And then it's the turn up and look at him, beautiful. To say cuckoo. And
Yeah.
let's talk Franz Oberhauser, because I've not read the books yet, so I can't comment, but I think I've said to you before, about 6 months before the film came out, obviously they did a John Harrison. This is Franz Oberhauser, he isn't Blofeld. Who would have ever predicted that Blofeld wouldn't be in the film called Spectre? Who would have thought?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I remember reading an article, I think it was on Den of Geek, and it was like, in the books, Franz Oberhauser was the stepbrother of James Bond, and that he grew up with after his parents died. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting thing. Like, if a villain could be that, or as a pseudo name, at least they've gone for someone with book history. If that makes sense. And then he gets the film. I was like, oh no, it's actually both of them combined together. It's both a pseudo name and his new identity, and I think that's where the film. I don't think it's the biggest problem of the film. It's one of many. It's again, it's the pipeline, right? You
Mhm.
sort of like it's like a flood, and it's like when people are like trying to like scoop out buckets from a flood, but the tap's still going,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the script, and it's one of those where again. How, on paper, it might have looked good. They might have thought, "Oh, look how intelligent this is." It's what you said about the Sam Mendes stuff, isn't it? It's so up itself. Like, of course, they're siblings. He's been the author of all of his pain and all of his. Was he always going to try and kill James Bond? And it's all just absolutely ridiculous, and it's just completely tailgated. And as you said, the drill scene. I forgot he got drilled into his brain. For some reason, I thought it never happened, and he threw the watch before. To see him get drilled like 2 or 3 times just devalues the whole purpose of the torture, because it's not hurting him enough to be Bond. And I love the watch that it blows his face off. I will say I love the cat. A lovely, lovely Easter egg.
Yeah.
Very
That's
random,
fine.
so on
That's
the
fine.
nose, but you can get away with it for a one-off scene. I mean, they didn't have the
Mm.
cat getting yeeted by the bomb against a wall or something, so
Very
who
funny.
knows what would have happened. But yeah, it's even the whole like base is dumb. Like, look at
It's
this
not particularly
fantastic.
visual either, is it? It's just
No,
sort of
it's
like
like a tour. It
clean,
looks like a space
clinical
center.
rooms, and you look back
Yeah,
at those earlier Bond films, like whichever Blofeld you go for, whether even the Diamonds Are Forever one, like the oil
it
rig
looked
is
more like
memorable, at least
Moonraker.
in terms of a place.
It looked
Um,
it looked like Hugo
Moonraker,
Drax's like Moonraker base, didn't it? But cleaner,
yeah,
and
like
it
Donald
just didn't
Pleasant's
work.
one was that massive, huge volcano set, wasn't it? Which is tremendous. Probably one of the the highlights of the Bond franchise. Even Blofeld in On Her Majesty's with with the ski retreat, that whole place with the angels and death and everything. It's memorable. Whereas this one, what we got a meteorite and then like a dentist chair in a clean white room.
And
That's it.
and even No Time to Die, judging off the sets we've seen in the trailers,
Oh, way better.
the
Yeah.
I said the Freddie Mercury base. I don't know what they're calling it,
Looks like a
but I don't know
tropical
what they
island,
call.
doesn't it, from what we've seen in the trailers so
Yeah,
far of some kind.
and it's
Yeah.
like a megalomaniac base, like back to basics, and
Yeah.
the whole Blofeld stuff. It's just the whole like, oh, we got to break the Guinness World Record. Great way to plug our quiz. Thank you for watching again. But it's like here's the big explosion we wanted to do, and watch it. It's like cool. It's kind of irrelevant to the story. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
one passing explosive did that chain reaction. I can't sometimes sit there, and it's as you said it last week when we spoke about it, that it's not. You look at the you said it well, didn't you? You look at the Dark Knight explosion with the hospital. That is a big explosion, and it's
You
got
remember
story
it, yeah.
purpose. It's been built to its story, and you remember everything. And And this was like, yeah, it just happened. They broke a Guinness World Record from it, and it's like, you know, Aston Martin, DBS, and Casino Royale. Yeah, they broke a Guinness World Record for it. Did a hell of a stunt in a story purpose as well. Whereas this was just like, we'll blow up the base for the sake of it. By the way, we're going to head to MI6 for another finale with another base to have another explosion. And you're like, okay.
It's just, I think it's just how it's shot as well. Like, it's not sort of, nothing feels
like
earned in the film.
One-liner. They like hold hands looking over it. It's like, this isn't Fight Club. Like,
yeah, yeah. Well, I was just reading here as well. Like, I mean, I don't know much about the books, but from reading this here, it looks like that Franz Oberhauser is a character that's just made up for Spectre. What is from the books is that apparently there's a character called Hans Oberhauser, who's a background character in the Octopussy and the Living Daylights short story collection. And in that book, it said that he was at once a legal guardian of a young James Bond in 1983. So Mendes was looking through sort of like old Bond history and Bond lore to continue the childhood angle that he he set up from Skyfall, which is fair enough. You know, if you're going to sort of like go into Bond's history, that's fine. So he looked at that. He saw the Oberhauser thing, and this is where we get the idea of the cuckoo. We know where this came from. So this is apparently a quote. Mendes conceived the idea of, quote, a natural child who had been pushed out, cuckoo in the nest, end quote, by Bond. So thus the character of Franz Oberhauser and the neglected child, everything like that is born from this movie, which is probably one of the biggest negative points I've seen a lot of people talk about this film. Now, what's funny about this is I thought this was just part of Bond lore in general. Like, I didn't think this was like a big to-do, like a whole thing like Blofeld being his brother, because a little film that we'll talk about in a few weeks' time when we get to the Austin Powers films, spoiler alert for the end of Austin Powers in Goldmember, Dr. Evil is Austin Powers' brother at the end, and there's this whole like funny little backstory throughout that film of how, they were separated at birth and everything like that, and one grew up to be a hero, one grew up to be evil. Because that parodied that angle, I thought that was just naturally part of Bond's history, and that was just a thing that they ran with in Austin Powers and Goldmember. I didn't realize that. I mean, this makes Spectre look all the more dumb in hindsight, doesn't it? That you're going to take that idea from Austin Powers and you're going to actually try and swing it in a serious James Bond film. I don't know. It's more of a coincidence for me that those two are so like connected in terms of the whole brother thing. So I don't know if Mendes in his downtime was also watching some of the Austin Powers films, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Shall we talk about one of the few great things in the film?
Yeah, I think we need to have some great things in there.
Yeah,
We've been quite down on this one today.
Big Dave Bautista. My, what an absolute icon this man is. Mr. Hinks, which is fine. This is the part where I probably bore Chris into the wrestling background speech. I'm joking. No,
go for it. It's fine.
Post Guard. I think this was his first film post Guardians 1. I may need to check that. Like a big film at least. The one thing we've missed from McCrae Gear is a henchman. We're not including Elvis from Quantum Solace, but Silver didn't need one. Love Silver for that reason, that he was his own henchman. He did everything himself. He was smart. He was up for it. And when you have a character operating from the shadows, kind of like Spy Love Me, isn't it? The whole like Jaws is going out to do the dirty work for Stromberg. And you think of Bautista and you think, he's just in Guardians of the Galaxy, he's in a comedic role. Now he wants to be the serious tough guy henchman. And in the Craig era, we've not had that henchman. A really good comparisons like Bane in The Dark Knight, that because it's that grounded reality, you need, obviously, you're not going to be able to do like comic Bane, but Tom Hardy had to like get big for that, get big and ripped. And then you like, if, in the world of Bond, you don't need an actor to do that, but they wanted a contact sport, I think personally said, like sort of like MMA or wrestling history. And Batista for me is both a blessing and a curse. And I'll give you why one reason. We spoke before we hit live. I think he is of all these wrestlers coming through, The Rock, John Cena started it. Now you've had a couple of other ones over the years go into acting. I've got no qualm of anyone doing Fast and Furious because we bloody love them and they're great. And the wrestlers are great in those films. It's what they need. And it's kind of summarized that it's wrestling. Batista's gone his own path. Of course, he did a few action films, some not as good, some comedies that some of them do, but he's always said his goal was to be an actor, not an action star. And it's always really, because I loved him as a kid, When I was back into my early teens, I loved him in it as well with wrestling. I'd always had this attachment to Batista, and it's really nice when you see some of these wrestlers come through and get their chance in Hollywood. Because don't get me wrong, love The Rock. Could talk all day about The Rock, but The Rock's playing The Rock and everything. And obviously, in Spectre, Batista's not at the level I'd say he is at now. Obviously, we're going to get Dune in a couple of weeks, which is going to be really interesting. I know Nikolai's seen it. Please don't comment any spoilers, Nikolai. I keep saying that. I'm half gutted that he got to do Bond pre Blade Runner because he said that Blade Runner is the film where he's been offered dialogue roles permanently since.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think he's in. I don't want to say interesting. He is a threat to Daniel Craig in this film. I think he operates the function of a henchman very well. And I would say it's in a film that's so bland and boring. It's quite nice to actually get a traditional Bond element come into this in the way it should be. It wasn't an overly elaborate henchman or anything. It was just that
Yeah.
here's a henchman chasing you, and less is more. And I think Batista operates that. He's got a kind of his gun's got two barrels, as we said. He's the silent type, but he's a persistent threat, and you get fantastic fights on the train. But I'm just kind of looking at now that we are gonna one of the biggest downfalls of No Time to Die was when we were doing the casting at work and like all these actors' names are coming in for the doubles. And I was like,
No
has
Dave
anyone got
Bautista.
Dave Batista?
Mm.
I was like, no one had Batista. I was like, is Dave Batista going to be? I was like, the one person there upset that Batista's not going to be in No Time to Die. And I think you said the other day he's probably filming Dune. I'm like, yeah, of course, that actually makes sense. But whether or not he got invited is the other thing. But for me, Batista, as a long time fan of him, it was nice to see him. He's one of the best things in this film. I'm glad that's held up because I've really enjoyed him back in 2015. And just as a side note, post Blade Runner, as we said, he's getting dialogue roles, and I think he's I'm not going to say that he's an Oscar worthy. Forget that stuff. But remember watching that Blade Runner opening scene, I was like, wow, that's Batista. Like,
Yeah, he's like acting. Like he's
he's acting. Like,
he's
and you know what? As a soft spot, I'm really happy. Like it's been very nice as a fan to see him grow to the point where he doesn't need Marvel anymore. And how many actors can say that these days?
Mhm.
But, he's quite open with his Marvel contract going. He wouldn't have even come back if James Gunn wasn't in it. So massive credit to Dave Batista, one of the few really positive things in this, because we've harped on how bad a lot of this film is, but I'm willing to talk the talk for this guy, and I really, really hope he gets some more justice in the future. Maybe not in Bond,
Mhm.
but I just think I'm glad we're getting to see him act. And he's just such a nice guy online. He's really cute with his fans, and I think he takes it personally. He got a bit upset with a couple of reviews once and stuff, and he's just someone that just deserves to do well. I don't really say that often. Sorry for the tangent, but
No, it's
that's
cool.
the young wrestling fan that saw
I
him
was
get
say
killed by the
you've got
great
the
Khali.
wrestling background
Yeah,
definitely out of the
that's
two of us, haven't you? So I mean, yeah, he's great in this film, and he is easily probably one of the best things in this film. I think that's absolutely fair to say. I did just check to see if he did another film in between Guardians and Spectre. He did. It was released the same year as Spectre. It was released in the June of that year. I mean, Spectre was definitely his main role after Guardians. It was a film called L.A. Slasher, where he played Drug Dealer 1. So let's just go out on a limb and say that Spectre was his first proper role
yeah,
after Guardians of the
wild.
Galaxy. I mean, he's still doing his action films. You look recently,
Did
not
one of
counting that.
Brosnan.
What, sorry?
I think it's called Final Score. He did a film with Pierce Brosnan where
Oh, Final Score. Yeah, there we go. 2018.
um
Yeah, I didn't know that
they
Brosnan
blew
was
up.
in that.
I know you're not big on your football, but they blew up the old West Ham Stadium, which is great because I hate West Ham United. And their traditional 100-year-old stadium was when they left it, they actually blew it up for the film, and that is just incredible. But
Oh
yes,
my God.
Brosnan I think plays like a Russian president, and Batista has to protect him or something silly like that.
I know I want to
So,
watch that film. You know, when you were going through your thing where you were watching other films with like similar
yes,
casts that were in Bond,
I
that I
wish
mean,
I'd done
that's
more.
you should do a Final Score one. I mean, he does other action films as well. Not counting the Marvel films. He's been in
Speed was great.
Escape Plan 2 and 3 apparently, which I wasn't even aware that they did an Escape Plan 2 and 3. Remember that film, the first one with Stallone and Schwarzenegger in the prison? Apparently, there's a 2 and a 3 with Batista in it. So I mean, and then there's Army of the Dead as well. Apparently, he's not done with Marvel. Apparently, he's in post production on Thor: Love and Thunder. Whether he's actually going to be in that film, I don't
Yeah.
know what capacity he might be in it. Whether it's like a quick blink and you'll miss it cameo, I don't know. But this is one of the ingredients, I've been talking about on this review, that sort of like the old school Bond ingredients, like the Roger Mooreisms with Daniel Craig and some of the humor, the quite over the top and cheesy elements to Blofeld's character, whether it be the torture device or his overall grand plan. that stuff doesn't work to me because it felt like the Craig era was building up to be more realistic and gritty. But I'm okay with Batista coming in to be that sort of like silent henchman-like character. I mean, they're clearly aping off the likes of Jaws, and probably Odd Job is the best comparison. The physical tank of a character who doesn't say anything or might only say like a few scant little lines of dialogue here and there. He is imposing. He is terrifying. I mean, he's introduced in the film. He crushes that guy's head, the mountain style, like with the Viper from Game of Thrones. Yeah, it's horrible, and no music. You just get the sound effect. He's a force to be reckoned with. He looks terrifying. He looks imposing. Bond looks like he's met his match when he's toe to toe with him. Going along with that, you have the great car chase sequence as well. He is that relentless force that is going to keep pursuing Bond.
Lovely
So
Jaguar as well.
oh,
Very nice car.
those cars are beautiful in that moment as well. And I mean, as a character, as a concept of a character, he is sort of like, as I mentioned, like the archetypal henchman character. But maybe it's because we haven't had that with any of the Craig films yet, that I was kind of clamoring for a henchman character that might make me come around to it a little bit more. But that being said, like, they are utilizing a similar ingredient to, the old school Bond films, but he feels modernized and he feels in keeping with the tone of what the Craig films up until this point have established. Like, he is brutal, he is gory. You would have never have seen that eye poking thing out in any of like the older Bond films, or it would have just cut away from it. Maybe in a License to Kill, perhaps, if they did something like that in that, because that film is probably one of the goriest ones actually, in retrospect. But yeah, he's great. And, that fight on the train sequence, not to jump ahead to our favorite scenes, but that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the film. It's well choreographed. It's intense. When he's like swinging and he's like breaking the bar and the bar just collapses, like he is just wrecking environments with his punches. And he's taken out in a pretty cool way. I love the whole like beer kegs tied around his neck. And I mean, you have the line where he goes like shit, and then he gets thrown out. It's fine. It is what it is. It's a funny moment. But
But he's not dead.
even that being said, yeah, it felt like they left the door open for him to bring his character back. Like, we've seen what he's gone through in this film. Look at the guy. Like, do you think that a couple of beer kegs around his neck getting flung out of a train is going to stop him? Absolutely not. And I think it's a shame because maybe you could have done one of those similar aspects where, oh, the henchman comes back again at the end type thing. But I mean, we're already pushing like 2.5 hours, and we've had the Blofeld ending, we've had the sea ending, and it's like, how long can we keep dragging this film out for? So it is a shame. I mean, I think it's fair to say he's probably not going to be in No Time to Die. I think we can probably
If
go
he
out on a
popped
limb and
up,
say he's not going to be. But yeah, if he
popped
crops
up,
up
there's
in
going to be
any
like
way,
one guy screaming at the Albert Hall, and it's just me as loud as I can from the rooftops. Like,
imagine if it's
why
the
do people?
pre-credit sequence. Could you imagine? If it's like an not octopusy type thing, a Moonraker type thing with skydiving with Jaws where he comes back. But maybe we can make Batista more comedic in this one, like that movie makes him. I'd love
Well,
to see him come back, but I know that he's not going to. But
yeah,
yeah,
I
it
think,
doesn't feel like a definitive death, does it? It feels like, oh yeah, he's going to come back. That's nothing. He's going
and I
to come
think he
back.
could have, and I think he is the kind of actor that. I'm not saying he's a franchise guy. As I said, he's done Marvel. He enjoys Drax. I think it's Guardians 3 he's going to go after. So I know they're going to
He's
start
done
filming that
Escape
soon.
Plan as well, apparently, if you can call that a franchise. He's done two of them.
And that's it. And I think he seems like the sort of person that's very, judging of how I follow him onto it. And yeah, obviously anyone's got social media profiles that are good, but he's very grateful for the opportunities he's had in film.
Mm.
And I think, for him to get Bond, I think he said on record he was a big Bond fan, and it was a really big thing for him. And obviously at the time of his career too, even Army of the Dead, which reviewed earlier this year, might have been the best film, but it was just nice to see him in a leading role finally. And obviously there's still some things to work out, but again, Dune's coming out soon. I think he's got a lot of potential. And looking back at Spectre, for the grounded reality, you do need a physical threat for Craig. And as you said, the train sequence, he's about to kill Bond, and does he get a shot at the side of his body by like Madeleine Swann or something? And
Yeah, I think so. Just shrugs it
and,
off.
and it's
Yeah,
like
it's
he's
nothing.
still trying to kill him, but then also you get that, not saying violence to him, but when you get that scene as well, when she goes to hit him, he just launches her across the room as well.
Twice. I
So
think that happens twice. Yeah.
the first time he shows as well, if you see it, when he kicks the table up, I think it like half knocks her out. But I'd say if anyone that's not seen Being James Bond, there's some really good behind the scenes stuff with Batista and Daniel Craig. Look like they're having a lot of fun. And the last hype point I'm going to make about him is that they will be reunited. Maybe not in No Time to Die, but for Knives Out 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Batista is there, and that was the casting thing that got me. If there's going to be You know, after Dune and maybe Blade Runner, there's another film you could get something really good out of him. I do think he's got a good chance in that film to absolutely steal it. So fingers crossed. But there's got to be a Bond reference, hasn't there, in that film? Like, if you're gonna have Craig and Batista together, there's got to be. They've got to do something. Like, especially when Daniel Craig's a producer in it as well.
Hmm. Too on the nose, maybe. I don't know, but any capacity, like I'm looking forward to seeing him in that. I don't know what his character's going to be like. I don't know if they've released character
Nothing yet.
posters or anything of what he's going to be
Nothing.
like.
Just set
Or
photos of them all getting onto a boat in Greece. So it's open. Maybe we'll get something soon. Who knows?
I'm pretty confident we will. Oh boy, I mean that's it for your positives. I
Oh
mean
no,
we're gonna get.
we've milked the Batista section as long as we could.
Oh, should we get onto the music then? Oh boy, here we go. So, I mean, if you guys watched our tier video, maybe you even submitted your own tier list. The point is, if you watched our tier video, you know that pretty much I mean, the song for this one ranked bottom of the barrel for all of us, really. But before talking about that, there is some preamble of unreleased, I guess unreleased. They have been released, but unused Bond songs essentially, and they're both from the English band Radiohead. I'm not a Radiohead fan. I'm going to come right out with it, but I know that they have their fans and they're very vocal about this song in particular. So apparently they were originally commissioned to write the title song, and they submitted a song called Man of War, which was an unreleased song that they'd written in the 1990s. But this was rejected almost immediately, because if they'd have done that, then it wouldn't have been eligible for the Oscar for Best Original Song, because it was already written and everything like that. So
Yeah.
they went away, pulled their heads together, and they recorded the song Spectre, which you can listen to. It's on Spotify, it's on YouTube. I think someone's done a very nice little fan edit of the opening title sequence with the music over it. I mean, it's very moody, it's very melancholy, and in fact, that's exactly the reason why it was rejected. It was too melancholy. Probably fits the tone of the film, but honestly, this song's almost unlistenable to me, and that kind of goes for like most Radiohead songs. In all honesty, it's the singing is whiny. It's terrible. I hate it. I can't listen to it. It's almost to the stage where it's unlistenable. And I can absolutely understand the reason why they rejected it as well. Some people, especially Radiohead fans, say, "Oh, this is the biggest travesty in Bond history. Like, what could have been if they'd have used this song?" I cannot imagine this song playing on the radio, especially when it's the big new Bond song. I don't know how much the Billie Eilish song was played on the radio. I know that Writings
Ooh.
on the Wall, I heard that a bunch of times. Skyfall was on the radio constantly. I remember at the time that film was coming out. This one, just no way on God's earth would anyone like tune in and listen to this. So then we get Sam Smith's Writings on the Wall. So he worked on the song with Jimmy Napes, who apparently was his like regular collaborator, and it's got it on here as well. We already knew this though. Apparently they went on record saying, and they were very proud of this fact, by the way, that they'd written the song in under half an hour before they started recording a demo. And I mean that says it all, really, doesn't it? Writings on the Wall, melody wise, instrumental wise, the orchestra, bloody beautiful song, fantastic, works well in the film. When those strings swell at the end of the pre-title sequence and it's gears up, it's like, oh yes, but I mean, we've already heard the song at that point, so we know we're not getting a good Bond song. One of my favorite parts in the film, and I guess this could tie in with the score as well, with Thomas Newman. I don't buy the relationship in this film at all, but it's right after Batista is offed and the music swells, and it's like a scene from Russia with Love, and they're snogging each other's faces off and everything. And when the piano kicks in, we cut to that wide shot of the train, like the bird's eye view. I don't know, it's like a beautiful sort of like editing with the music and everything. And the best thing about it is there's no Sam Smith voice in that part of the film. It's just the instrumental, and it works. The problem comes into it with Sam Smith. Again, like Radiohead, I'm not a Sam Smith fan at all. I don't like his voice, and it's the vocal that lets this song down for me. When it gets into that high pitched falsetto, it just doesn't let up. It's just like constant. It's repetitive. The constant chorus repeats. It's an awful song, and I think what makes it worse is as well. Previously you'd had Adele's Skyfall, which was massive. Like the song or not, you can't deny that song was huge, especially because it was the anniversary. We've talked about that song to death in our tier video anyway. So already the bar was set ridiculously high for whoever came on board to do the next song, but Christ almighty, could have come up with something better than this. I'm going to hand over to you. I know your opinions on the song already, but it's bad. It's very bad.
Yeah, I want to say about the tier video. Another lovely little thank you to everyone that sent us them in. I know we said it in the quiz, but I'm not going to sit here and say, what films were at the bottom a lot, what were at the top. This, amongst Madonna, was at the bottom of a lot of people's. I disagree with one of them. I'll go listen to that video. No, I know that 'cause obviously Calvin came on Skyfall last week and mentioned that he
He likes
enjoyed
it.
it. And
Yeah,
yeah, and
that's
he
fair
liked it.
enough.
And there has been a few people, so I will leave it there. And it did win an Oscar, which is right up there with Suicide Squad in terms of like Oscar bracket question mark exclamation mark question mark again. Um,
And it was the first
oh,
Bond song as well to reach #1 in the UK charts
yeah,
as
I
well, wasn't
know.
it? Even over
I don't know if they
Adele.
count.
Over
I
Adele.
don't know
Like,
if they counted stream, but Calvin did that thing, didn't he? That Adele released like a day before or after the window
oh,
started,
that's
didn't
right.
qualify, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a weird one. But the I don't want to go into. I just hate the song so much. I will follow up the the background music. I'm terrible with music. You don't call it behind the scenes. What do you call it?
It's just like the
The
orchestral,
orchestral. Yeah, it's
yeah, like
orchestral.
the accompaniment to it. Yeah.
As I said in the Tears video, I will never forget the day that they released the preview for the song.
They
And
released the best
again,
10 seconds of the song, didn't they?
yeah, and I was like,
They
I
knew.
listened to
They knew.
I sent it to my friend. I was like, mate, look at this. Like, we're about to get an absolute classic Bond theme here, like Adele.
Did you stop up for it
And
as
then
well? I remember stopping up till
I
like
stayed up.
midnight, wasn't it?
I
Or
stayed up. Yeah,
yeah.
I wonder if we wrote about it to each other. We'll have to dig those messages out. We'll do it after. But um, and then the words just started coming out the mouth. I was like, hey. And as I said, I don't know music. I'd never listened to a Sam Smith song. I know he's popular. I'm sure he did one of the big FIFA songs once, but I was like, what's going on? And every 30 seconds it was, I was like, what? Like, I was so confused. And as you said, there's like a note towards the end which he hits all right, and it's fine. But I'm like that's it. That's the best you got. Like what? Like I just hated it, and I tried. I did that thing where I listened to it so much that I could try and convince myself I
I'm
enjoyed it,
I'm
and
still
I
doing
ended up
that. I still try and
yeah,
do
and
that even now with my playlist that I've got
like
for it. Yeah.
very rarely I won't skip it and I'll give it a go. And I know most of the words to it, which is
Same. Yeah.
irrelevant. And as I said, I've done my research, but it's just never clicked with me. And as I said, because I'm not a big music aficionado, I don't really dislike many songs, if that makes sense. I don't know enough about music to throw them in there. But as far as the Bond themes go, for me, this is I think because you've got such an incredible opening scene, it looked even worse with the main film.
Mhm.
And that was the other thing. Like the way it came in, it didn't suit the pre-credit sequence. The animation, the weird anime hentai stuff was a bit weird to watch as
I was gonna
well.
bring up the title sequence.
Yeah,
I get it, Spectre, it's the
Spectre the
bloody
octopus, but
octopus, isn't it? I get it, but
you
yeah,
know,
there's the idea of it and then seeing it. And then also like the shirtless Craig that looks like ridiculously photoshopped with all the flames around him and so I don't know. There's something about it just looks
and
weird. The whole thing's
they
weird.
bring back some of the do they bring back some of the silhouettes?
They do a Spider-Man. They do a Spider-Man 3 opener, don't they? With like, do you remember like the previous films? And yeah, I actually don't know if they show Quantum of Solace because I remember at
Oh
the
no, sorry,
time.
I've got mixed. I've been playing Bloodstone, and that has an opening title sequence, and they steal the Casino Royale. Here's the black and white silhouettes being edited. Sorry, that's
Oh,
why it's
do
in my
they?
head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, right on the. I just it's it's a song that happened. It came in and went. It's got its fans, but you know, not many of them. And again, it was just. I think we was like, was that the first year we did an Oscar live stream, and
I
it won
think so.
best song. We
Yeah.
were like, what? And not to sound horrible, I really like the No Time to Die song. I know we're a bit different on that, but if Sam Smith's song's winning it because it was the Bond
Oh,
song, Spectre would
yeah.
like Billie Eilish to win the Oscar because now a precedent has been set where I demand that every Bond film now wins Best Song just because Rosie from the Wall did. Come back to me in March. We'll find out if it's true or not. But she's already won a Grammy for it, and the film's not come out. It's already a platinum record, and the film's not come out. So, and 2 days from now, we'll have sent the opening animation to go with it.
Mhm.
You know,
I think that's gonna
low
be key, isn't
standards.
it, with that song in
Yeah,
particular? I mean, for me, it was just like, oh, we've got sort of like another down and brooding song, but I haven't seen the film. Maybe it could really work with the film. I think that's a big part of what goes into the music as well, of how it serves the film as well. And I don't think this serves the film all that specially, really. Orchestral piece notwithstanding, because when that is used, and I always love when the Bond films do that, where they do take the melody from the opening title song and you sort of like bleed it throughout the movie. It's really good. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the title sequence. Just going back to the title sequence really quickly, as I mentioned, it's kind of like the Spider-Man opening title sequences where they show clips of the
Yeah.
previous films. It's just going with that sense of tying everything together. But I swear to God, they don't do Quantum of Solace, which always made me laugh at the time, because Quantum of Solace is sort of like that. It's sort of like the inbred step cousin of the family, isn't it? Like, we don't talk about him. He's there. He's part of the family, but we're not going to sort of like pay it any attention. Like, you get, I think you see Vesper drowning. I think you see Lashif. I know that you see Silver as well with the face when he takes the mouthpiece out, but I swear to God, you don't see anything from Quantum. I might be wrong. If anyone can correct me, please do.
It's
But
like the
yeah,
trailer, the new trailer when it did the whole end game. Like, here's the
yes,
story up to now.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, here's a trailer shot from Quantum of Solace, not a shot from the film.
yeah,
And it was after the Skyfall and Spectre clips were shown. Um, but yeah, it's a weird, especially when I would argue that Quantum of Solace is maybe the most important Craig film before Spectre. In
yeah,
terms
yeah.
of not important in terms of the Spectre plot, it ties into Quantum more so than I would say Skyfall and Casino.
Well, I
I
mean,
know,
it's the only
yeah,
two films that talk about it. In, I mean, I guess you can sort of go back to Casino and go, okay, well, in hindsight, yeah, it's tied to that, but specifically mentioned, I think, well, Quantum and Spectre are the only two that do it out of the four films so far, isn't it? I think.
yeah. But
And then
maybe
I guess
Casino
like
will
just
make references. Maybe
yeah,
Cammy will come back.
maybe we can retcon some more stuff in No Time to Die. Who knows? I don't know. I'm really looking forward to it though. I've seen what they do with it, but I guess like the last thing we talk about as well is the score. Thomas Newman.
Not fond
Honestly,
of
not
that.
that remarkable. I couldn't sort of like pick out any sort of key scene to you where it stood out to me. I think the only scene where I sort of really paid attention to the music, other than the very end of the film, which is the classic Bond main theme, is the bit where it does do the reprise of Writings on the Wall, where they're on the train. That's where you get that swell of the orchestra kicking in. But other than that, like the actual score of the film, really forgettable for me.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it was when we did the review with Shayla, she mentioned, I think she did mention the score for this film actually. I think she said that he reuses a lot of the same music from Skyfall. But honestly, I couldn't remember any music from Skyfall either, so I don't know if that was the case or not.
I really like the Skyfall soundtrack, but there are moments in that soundtrack that can separate it from the others. Um, and what I want to add to that as well is that you got like the Shanghai stuff feels great. Emma's got her own theme which they riff off when she has that dumb cameo. The less said about that, the better. And I didn't even notice any riffs. I think this is one of the, not sounding weak, but forgettable Bond scores. Like normally, for more the recent ones, I've gone out and listened to them after we've watched it or got a couple of songs on and stuff. And for this one, I was like, I'm just going to go listen to the 1917 score because that is a beautiful soundtrack by Thomas Newman. And I think Spectre's again that like it just doesn't feel like there's any energy in the film. Like you mentioned how
Yeah,
miserable and depleted it is.
that's it.
I feel that there's both that and there's no energy for anybody to go out their way to make it look good, except Batista make back in the good books you are. So yeah, unfortunately, and also this is the last Bond film we're up to, so Thomas Newman isn't coming back. There's no big farewell like David Arnold, who deserved a big farewell moment, but we are getting the Zimmer, and he has released a couple of songs online. We won't go into them for those that haven't listened, but I did let myself listen to one today and got very excited. So I'm hoping we get a return to greatness in the No Time to Die soundtrack. It's got the potential. Even in that main theme, you can hear the Hans Zimmer guitar riff coming, can't you?
Yeah, yeah. We'll have to. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it sort of like pairs with the film, because that's the big thing as well. Like, you can listen to music in
Exactly.
isolation, but seeing it in the film, how it goes over. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and just it's still surreal to me that Hans Zimmer is doing a Bond soundtrack. Whether it'll be a one and done, I
It
don't
was like
know.
thrown in so. I'm sure it was like February last year.
Yeah,
It was
it
like,
was
oh,
quick.
Hans Zimmer,
Yeah,
do you no Nolan and no Tenet? It's gonna all be about doing. It's like, but Hans Zimmer's like, yeah, I've just happened to squeeze in doing a Bond film, and I'm like, we're either gonna get
what?
some like mad, like how Giacchino had like 6 weeks to do Rogue One, and it was incredible.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know how long Zimmer had, but I've got faith in him. And from that song I listened to today, I think also off into is what people have said. Like, I think we're getting like some form of mixture of a sort of David Arnold meets John Barry. Like they're
All right,
saying
yeah.
apparently he's took inspiration from the old Bond scores. So I'm really optimistic for it. And on the Hans Zimmer hype train, 2 Hans Zimmer scores in the space of like 2 weeks as well. I've been waiting a long time for something that's not a Boss Baby too, so I'm really excited.
And let's hope it's a good one. We'll find out in a couple of days' time. Which takes us on to, oh God, favorite scenes and the one-liner. Oh God. I'm
Have we
trying to
said
think of the.
them?
I
I've
think we've
got
said
plural of
them. I
scenes.
mean,
I've
Dia
got a
dos
plural.
Muertos, the train
Yeah.
fight, and the final scene of the film.
And the car chase we haven't spoke about, but it just looked great. It was a really interesting. Like, I don't think Rome's ever going to get that quiet. In truth, I'm
Yeah,
not telling you
I thought
that
that
answer.
too. I was like, come on, it's Rome. Like, they don't have any curfews there, do they? After a certain time,
I would have
like the Vatican. Like, it wasn't the
imagine
Vatican
like
they
a
were
John
driving
Wick
around there.
reference. Imagine if, like John Wick reference, like Bond had come down. They're like, "Have you come to kill the Pope?" And then this time, like Daniel Craig would just look with those blue eyes, and they'd be on red alert.
Oh, that's a shared universe we need. Let's get Mission Impossible.
You know
Let's
what? I've
get
thought this.
Bond and John Wick.
The
Let's
last
do
few
it.
months, if you were going to have to, those three are in the conversation, right? If you were going to have Ethan Hunt or John Wick cameo in a Craig Bond film, which of the two would it be? That's a really interesting question because Ethan Hunt's too on the nose, but just John Wick sat in the corner of a bar with Craig at the other side. I just think that'd be
Oh, that's.
incredible. I'd take that in a heartbeat, you know.
If someone hasn't photoshopped that already, like someone needs to get on that because that would be incredible. I don't know which way I prefer it, to be honest. I
It's an
guess
interesting one. I've seen that question thrown around. I've seen it thrown around on Twitter, and it's a really interesting one.
I think James Bond in a Mission Impossible film, because Mission Impossible, like I don't know, like I love the recent Mission Impossible films are bloody fantastic. In my opinion, might have even sort of some of the recent Bond films like superseded some of them, but I think people take the Mission Impossible films less seriously than the Bond films and the
Yeah.
canon of Bond. And the word canon is thrown around with Bond, which isn't a word that's really thrown around with the Mission Impossible films. So I guess I'd do it that way. But either way, whatever way they do it, I'd love to see that. It'd be incredible. Favorite scenes? I'm trying to think of any other ones. I like the boardroom meeting right up until the cuckoo line, when Blofeld's first introduced. Shit, I'm struggling after
No,
that
it's not.
point. I
I think
can't think of any more.
we've not had a video like this since Euros only.
We haven't really talked about the action scene in Austria, have we? With the
No,
plane. I don't know if
I'm
it's. I mean, it doesn't really stick out in my mind to the point where I've even just almost forgotten to talk about the whole goddamn set piece.
the the problem I have with that is that this film is trying to be everything. You know, I criticize Quantum Solace. It's like we must have an action sequence in every form we can. And that's because they didn't have a script. This one was like we must travel to every exotic location possible. Like there's a lot more globetrotting than normal. It's like the anti Skyfall. Like look at us. I guess it's a bit like lockdown, isn't it? You've been stuck in England for like 2 years, and now like these people are just desperate to go everywhere. Not that I'm going to be going out traveling around Europe or anything, but it's like boom Austria, boom Rome, boom whatever country had the blowing up hotel is, boom back to London, and
With
there's a lot of
Mexico
things.
as well at the beginning.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
the Austria sequence, I don't. It's a very good practical stunt. I don't mind it. It is just a really like thrown on action set piece, and it's just
At that point, I'm like dying. I'm like the pacing
yeah,
of this
it's
thing.
the
I'm
pacing's getting
feeling it.
wrong, and it's also like he leaves the building and then just happens to be in a plane. Where the
Hmm.
fuck? And you know me, I don't tear down like the Bond films because you could do it for every single Bond film, and we said to kind of say that was Skyfall, but this is one of the films I'm like, where did that plane come from? Like, because he just grabs her and puts her in a car, and then Bond is in a plane. And
Yeah.
I can let a lot of things slide, but when it is that random, I get it if it's a helicopter and there's one on the roof, fine, don't care. It's like a plane is a very different thing. So yeah, that's my tangent with that scene, and also I think we spoke about the Mandela effect, didn't we? And I was like, I'm also convinced for some reason Bond went skiing in this film, but he doesn't either.
See, you thought he went skiing in this film. I thought there was a Union Jack parachute in this film, which isn't the
Like
case.
combined,
It's just
I
a.
think combined, we maybe just assumed each other's as well.
It's like I think we just watched Spy Who Loved Me, didn't we? In another life, maybe. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I know I did. I watched it when in the lead up to this film. Maybe that's what I had in mind when I came to this film. I don't know, but I distinctly remember that. So that's weird. It's two Mandela effects in the span of 1 week. It's kind of messing with my mind. And I guess the other scene we need to talk about as well, just in terms of scenes we haven't talked about in the film. It's sort of like the very ending. What always gets me, and this was really weird to me watching this. So you've got Blofeld. He's taking off. He's escaping in his plane, right? And Bond's chasing after him in the speedboat, and he's like taking pot shots at him, and he's hitting the plane, but Blofeld just looks completely nonchalant, like he's not aware that it's going on. And it's only when he hits the top of the helicopter and it bursts into flame, he's like, "Oh, what was is someone shooting at the helicopter?" I'm like, he's been shooting at the helicopter for like 5 previous shots, and he's hit the helicopter. Why is this suddenly like a big surprise to Blofeld? I don't know. It's just the thing is, like, it feels low key again as a third act,
Yeah.
similar to how Skyfall did. But Skyfall worked because you were invested in the character and the motive of the villain. You wanted to see M protected. The Scotland thing, you could argue, was cool, to go back to that. It's a different location, different feel to the ending. And it was a much more self-contained, personal, well-written, and believable ending to the character of Silver and everything that happened with that. And of course, the emotional payoff of M dying at the end of the film. This one, what have you got to go on? It's, as we mentioned at the beginning, you've got the stuff with C going on, which you don't care about. Do you really care about Madeleine Swann being held captive and Bond? And that net scene as well, where he jumps and he free falls and the convenience again. Oh, the net. Of course, there's a net there
I
at the
thought it was gonna
bottom.
be
And
I thought it was gonna be more water, like, the whole, like,
yeah,
running
yeah,
joke we
yeah.
had with Vin Diesel recently.
Then we could go into the Spectre, the Skyfall opening title sequence again, couldn't we? We're just like in this horrible loop of films back to back. But yeah, it's just you don't care about it, and then just Blofeld taking off in a helicopter, and there's the whole to do where he's scarred and he's burnt up and he's there on the ground, and the whole ending just lacks any kind of impact. And honestly, most of the action beats in this film, maybe with exception to the pre-title sequence, perhaps, and even that compared to Skyfall's pales in comparison, in my opinion, as a pre-title sequence, as a spectacle goes. Other than that, you've maybe got your car chase in Rome, maybe your
Probably it.
fist fight on the train, but besides that, you go out of your way to have these big, expensive, and as we say, like, the production of this thing was massive. I don't know if it is the most expensive Bond film, but you had the studios as well complaining they were going wildly over budget, and I think they actually wanted to rein back some of the practical stunts and everything in the film to try and keep the cost down. And I think they were, Sony were overruled by that. But you have these, the scene in Austria, as we mentioned, with the plane and the wings being broken off and sort of like skidding down the hill and everything. You've got these big elaborate sequences, and we almost forgot to mention it. It's just so it's nothing. It feels absolutely nothing, and I don't think you get that sense of spectacle even from the filmmaking in this one. Like, go back to the previous film as well. I don't want to compare it too much, but because you've got the same director, you kind of have to. The Shanghai stuff, very small moment in
Yeah.
Skyfall, but just from a shot composition and the lighting, you remember that scene just from how it looks. And I don't feel like you have any of that in this film, despite it being the same director.
I'm absolutely with you on that, and yeah, it is hard of those scenes that you just if you'd have put these side by side, put play, show it to a random that's never seen a Bond film, I don't think they'd think it's the same director either.
Mm.
They feel so far apart in everything they're trying to do, where one gets it right, one gets it wrong, and in regards to this favorite scenes, it's just hard to.
This is our favorite scene section, and we've gone back into being negative.
Yeah,
Oh god,
I'm just
yeah,
I'm just gonna say the train sequence because I will add this. I haven't spoken this. Daniel Craig can wear the white tux.
yes, yeah.
That is a skill that not many people I think can do. Maybe I'm just over exaggerating, but he wears the shit out of that, and I'm glad they
Mhm.
put that on the posters because he looks great in it. And he's also a lot of people love his Roger Moore costume as well. With it looks like
With the
scuba diving gear.
grip.
It's not, but yeah, with the holsters. I
Oh yeah,
always
I know
forget.
which. Yeah, yeah.
I forget what scene it's from, but I just remember it in all the posters. But
Mhm.
again, Craig isn't the problem with this film.
No,
And sort of
no.
looking back, sort of, I mean, do we have a one-liner? We've got the
Very,
C one
very
we've not spoke
few.
about.
As I've said, unlike any other Bond, I mean, I've done this with a couple of the other Bond films, but not to this degree. This was a stream of consciousness. I've probably got like two one-liners that I haven't already mentioned, and they're not that great. And it was just me slipping slowly into madness. Small stuff. I put the photo of Oberhaus. I was like, oh, it's conveniently burned over
Yes,
Franz's face.
of his
Like, oh,
head.
I'm like, yeah, just his face. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. What else did I put on here? New York playing on the radio is dumb and cringe. That was another thing.
Don't
I think
even know what that song is.
that's in the car chase. It's that bab bab ba da da
Ah,
bam, but it starts. He's like, "Oh, come on!" He turns it off on the radio. I'm like, that's a Roger Moore joke, and it would have been fine in that. It doesn't fly with me and with Craig. What else have I got on here? 1 hour in, I wanted to die. Yeah, it sounds like me watching this film. Anyway, one liners. Let's see. I
I've only
had
got the one from M.
Go on, you say that one then. Yeah, go on.
And it's like the enter morality. Oh, you're a moron. Isn't that what M stands for? It's like, oh, was it? I can't deliver it as well as Ralph
And
Fiennes,
now
but
we know what C
what
stands
C
for.
stands for. Like, it's like
Careless.
Harvey Dent in bed, and it's like, say it. It's like, care. I mean, to be fair, I'm not gonna. I actually really like the delivery of Careless.
Mhm.
I do think he delivers it well. But if they'd just left it and we all know what C stands for, that just would have like
Perfect.
brought the house down.
Perfect.
It's
Yeah, they
like when
should have
Judy
left
Dench
it
said
there.
shit, didn't she? It's like here's M essentially calling someone. I'm not going to say because I think we've said it on these. I don't care about saying it in football matches, but it feels weird to say it in a Bond film. But he never has to because we all know what C stands for deep down.
Yeah.
Um,
And just break
any
that
other
down as a
one-liners?
line before that. Oh, that's what M stands for, moron. It's like
The 4-year-old.
three writers penned this script. Like, come on. Like, oh, it's just so bad. So bad. But I mean, if you are going to pick like the best of a bad bunch in terms of the lines of this film, that was on my list too. Let's
I'm trying to
see.
think of
I
anything,
had
if
the.
anything else.
Do you know any other bird calls, Franz? I've already said that. The only other one that I've got on here, this is really slim pickings this week, guys. You shouldn't stare. Well, you shouldn't look like that. I mean, that's a cool Bond line.
Also, where did you get the dress from? Sorry,
Yeah,
like where did they both get the tux and dress from? Like that was weird. Like again, I'm not going to go into like the Bond films, but you know, it was just a bit random that scene.
there was another all right one as well. It's in the scene where you've got the two guys approaching Monica Bellucci about to assassinate her, and he shoots them, and she says, "You've bought me about 5 minutes," and he's like, "Great, let's go for a drink," or "Time for a drink," or something like that. That's an all right one, but that is it, guys. And I'm really hoping that No Time to Die has some absolutely cracking
I think
ones,
we're going to
and
get some. I think we're going to get some.
there'll be no spoilers this Thursday for our review, so we're not gonna. It's not really gonna fit the mold and the plan of what we do on these retrospectives. We're gonna save that for the spoiler review when we get to that one. I think we're gonna wait for the US release date on that one before we start talking about it to give people more of a chance. People internationally more of a chance to watch it. I think unfortunately for the Australians, we might we might have to get that out before you guys get to see it. Unfortunately. But I'm going to be. Hopefully, I'm not there in the cinema on my second or third viewing for this film, just sort of on my phone writing down all the one-liners so that I remember them. I don't want to be that guy. But yeah, I guess that'll. I guess final thoughts on the film in case we haven't already been crystal clear. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I'm gonna end it with a one-liner. Miserable. That's what M stands for.
I mean, I can't echo that more than what you have right there. I really wanted to like this film, guys. I really did. Obviously, when I first watched it, I wasn't much of a Bond fan, but now I've been on this journey over 24 weeks. I thought, you know what, I might actually come around to this, especially watching them in sequence, and didn't do it. Didn't do it for me. This is probably the most laborious, difficult Bond film to get through, in all honesty. The pacing is awful. You feel it from the first 45 minutes. And as we've got into almost breaking the runtime of
I
this
just
thing,
checked it. 2 hours 28.
we're
Does
coming
ours
up
feel
close
as
to
long
it.
as theirs?
Well, I think we've moved through this at a much better pace than the actual film does. And it's a shame because, the cast that you have in this thing, the talent that you have, the biggest problem with this film, other than just sort of like the general visual of the film, like the look is very murky and dark, and that adds to the miserable, boring quality to it. I don't think that helps at all. It's the script and the story. It's so paper thin, weak, and, with a 2.5 hour runtime, doesn't do it any favors. So, I mean, we've got nowhere to go but up after this one, haven't we? So I'm really hoping No Time to Die delivers. I will be seeing it at the midnight, so I'm really ecstatic for that. I can't wait. I think that'll be my first midnight screener I've done since. Oh God, I think it was Star Wars Episode 8.
What a great film to
Okay,
do it for, though.
not getting into a debate on that one,
Not
but
now,
hopefully
not tonight.
not tonight. I'm too tired for that tonight. But yeah, I guess that'll. I was going to say that does it for the Bond retrospective. Of course, it doesn't, because we're going to be having our review for No Time to Die, and we've got plenty of other Bond videos coming out and everything. I don't know if we want to bring up the schedule. I know that we brought it up on our quiz, but we can bring it up again now, I think.
Absolutely, guys. So, as we said, we've just done the quiz. At the time of recording, the quiz was yesterday. It was great fun. Spoiler free this Thursday, the 30th. We have dated down the 5th of October for the spoiler video. However, if anything changes, we'll probably figure something out between us. We have the ranking video on the 19th of October, and our sort of discussion ideas for on the 24th of October who we'd love to see for the next Bond villains, any directors, anything involved we'd love to see. So a lot more Bond things coming. And there is going to be another James Bond quiz, which we haven't got a date for yet, but we will give you more details. That'll probably be in October, I would assume, but we need to plan that between us and we'll keep you in the loop as always. And just a quick one. As we said, we finished off the I guess you could say the currently released Bond films.
Yeah.
But we're going to go for some other ones down the line. Once we've sort of done with No Time to Die and the other Bond stuff, we're going to have a quick look at Casino Royale, Never Say Never Again, the Austin Powers trilogy in honor of Spectre, and then, of course, Johnny English as well. So a lot more Bond things on the way. And one final reminder for you guys at home, if you've been following us across this retrospective, we've had a ranking game going on. Everyone we bring on the channel, we ask them to pick their favourite Bond upon entry. Currently, heading into No Time to Die, we have, I guess it's like a two-way tie, right? We've got two people joined on first place, two people joined in second place. Fortunately, not enough love for Craig or Lazenby, but, that's absolutely fine. But Chris, you're going to have the decider. Are you going to do it on the No Time to Die spoiler review or spoiler-free? That's my question.
We've got to give a reason for people to come back, right? So I'm going to delay my choice because it has changed. I can say that. I'm going to leave it at that, but I'm going to announce it on the spoiler review for No Time to Die, which will be, obviously we'll have more videos after that as we've just gone into the schedule, but that will feel like the definitive bookend for me in terms of all the Bond things and the Bond content and the reviews. So look out for that, where we will announce the who is the favorite Bond overall. Very interesting that there's currently, I mean, there might be with mine, there's no Lazenby or Craig on there, so you'll have to wait and see. So tune in for that. Once you've watched No Time to Die, once you've watched it once, twice, three times, God, I don't know how many times you'll probably watch the film by then. But yeah, I think that's all the preamble. We'll just go over the socials, really quickly at the end right here. So if you want to follow us for more content, well, yeah, first and foremost, let us know what you thought of Spectre, if you haven't been doing so already. We've gone on much longer on this one than we thought we would, but this was like therapy. I think we had to vent.
We needed this.
We had to get this out of our system. We feel cleansed now. We're going to move into No Time to Die with high hopes. So let us know what you think of the film. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are you kind of in between on it? Do you see the positives and negatives? Anything regarding this film, the Bond franchise, and your hopes for No Time to Die, please do drop us a comment. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe as well as we continue with the Bond content and other videos as well. And if you want to find what those other videos are, you can find us on our social medias. That's Facebook at Cinema Savvy. We're at Twitter at cinema_savvy, letterbox.com/cinema savvy. And of course, if you want to pick up some merch, we've got the TeePublic link in the description down below. So that's just more information on across all of our socials about what we've got coming up. And of course, that all important Bond quiz. So there'll be more details for stuff like that. So look out for that. That'll do it for us, guys, and we will see you on Thursday, where we get to report on a brand new James Bond film. So it's going to be exciting. So until that day, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.